And I'd like to call us to order for our budget workshop number 1. It's Tuesday, May 3rd. Welcome to everybody here online as well as in the audience. If we could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Riddle.
Present.
Mr. McBride.
Present.
Mr. Ewing. Ms. Hannah.
Yes.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak.
Yes.
Ms. Leguizamo.
Present.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. Everyone's here. I'd like to mention that our board president is away, so he's asked me to step in to just chair this workshop, this first of our board workshops for our budget agenda for the fiscal year 2023, 2024. Before we move any further into our budget agenda, however, for tonight, I would like to remind everyone that this week is officially designated annually as Teacher Appreciation Week.
Yes.
On behalf of the board, I would like to say how thankful we are for the outstanding work of our teaching staff. As a board, we recognize and appreciate the many contributions our teachers make to their students and families and to the success of the Waukegan Community District 60 school. Teachers' dedicated and tireless work continues all year long. Thank you so much, District 60 teachers. Would any board members like to make a statement at this time?
I'd just like to say.
Ms. Hannah, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to say also that you are very appreciated, valued. We understand and know that we have challenges in our district, but just know that you are supported by the board, and we appreciate you, and happy Teacher Appreciation Week.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Hannah. Anyone else want to make a statement? Okay. With that, let's move to item 3, which is approval of minutes. I'm not sure if I saw those. Were they attached? No, I don't see any. Okay, so I don't see any minutes for this past board meeting, so let's move on to reports and presentations, which I believe now is our budget workshop. Ms. Polk, I believe you're going to start this off.
Yes, good evening, Board, Vice President, board members, superintendent, and colleagues and community members, if there are any here. Thank you for attending Budget Workshop 1. And so staff is going to present information to you tonight, but if there are any questions that I have to come up and answer, I'll be available to answer those.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Of course, you know Ms. Gwendolyn Polk and Mr. Brian Luoso, who have been heading the business office here in Waukegan for the past many years. My name is Nicholas Chin, the coordinator of state and federal programs, here to walk you through the first couple of slides. So the agenda for today, of course, will be going over the budget calendar. We have a slide about the historic ISB financial profile of the district going back to 2003 up to present. We will be discussing a bit of the Strategic Budget Development Committee meeting, which we conducted. We'll be covering general state aid and evidence-based funding allocations, financial trends. We'll be providing you with a summary of the revenues and expenditures of the funds, a summary of the budget requests, the school improvement plans, inclusive of new positions and stipend requests, provide an overview of those pieces of information, and of course in the slide deck there is a link to the details, the fine details behind the figures that will be presented to you today. There is a slide indicating some additions that have not yet been added in the projections regarding some budget items and proposed budget items and the retention incentive program. The clarification will be provided about the ISB evidence-based funding coding error that took place, and initiatives to sustain the district and its positive financial outlook will be discussed as well, ending of course with a time for questions. Next slide. So the budget calendar, which is typical, beginning in November, going through or disseminating the end-of-year closeout procedures, and of course moving up to present. Here we are in May with budget workshop number 1, having already conducted a budget development committee meeting. Moving through the calendar, we can see in June, second budget workshop, possibly having a third budget workshop in August, posting notice in the local newspaper as of August 5th, providing the review period from August 5th to September 6th, and then having the formal budget hearing and adoption in September. Next slide. So on this slide, you'll notice this is a kind of a historic overview of the financial profile score that the Illinois State Board of Education has assigned to Waukegan since 2003. So going from right to left on the chart. On the right, there's the column that's a 1 for 2003, and then going to the left, we go all the way up to 2021. And of course, the trend that we notice is that that financial profile score, 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest, has increased unquestionably. So I'd like to bring a couple of pieces of information to help illustrate the accomplishments, really, of the district in regard to achieving this high financial profile score for the past few consecutive years. So you'll notice over on the right there are some comments. So that first comment is that general state aid in fiscal years 2014, 2015, and 2016 was prorated, meaning that the district did not receive its full allotment of money through general state aid. Those percentages, when we combine it into real numbers, those 3 years combined, comes out to approximately $42 million across all 3 of those years together that the district did not receive. However, when we look at those years on the chart, you will still notice that the trend, the upward trend in the financial profile score was in the positive trajectory. Okay, so that was one challenge that the district faced back in those years. The district has faced a declining EAV consistently over the past many years. And in the recent years, recently, we've kept taxes level. Okay, so despite all of those financial stresses, the district has still managed to improve its financial profile score with the Illinois State Board of Education. Currently, we have 128 days cash on hand. If we go back to the years when we were being prorated, and again, that goes back to 2014 to 2016, we had approximately 70 days cash on hand. So that's a move in the right direction. And I would also like to note that in 2016, that's when we moved to zero-based budgeting, where we really were able to identify priorities, direct funds towards addressing those areas of need in a strategic manner, and of course to the financial benefit of the district, seeing that post 2016, the financial profile score is very robust. Previously, the district operated more on a rollover budget style of resource allocation, which does not necessarily address the priority needs of the district. So we've been able to accomplish all of that, much to our pride, and we're happy to report on that. Now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Andy Lattimore to continue with the presentation.
I'm sorry, I have a question. On the calendar, it says that we're going to adopt the budget on September 6th. Does that mean we're going to have a different meeting date?
We'll adjust that date based on the scheduled board. We typically adopt the budget or want to adopt the budget the first Tuesday in that month, so that if there's any corrections, we have 2 weeks to make it before the statutory deadline. So It says September 6th, but if the board meeting is a week later, then we'll adjust.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Good evening, Mr. Vice President, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Superintendent Placencia, and to my colleagues and community members here and viewing us at home. Thank you for joining us. You saw on the calendar that we literally start the year's budget the day after you adopt. And that process is a very tedious process that starts with schools developing their school improvement plans, departments developing their department plans, showing goals, capturing contracts, capturing operating expenses that are compiled, and it's vetted through the division deputies. They review it, and then it comes to what we like to call our pool of critical friends, our Strategic Budget Development Committee, which met on the 22nd. They view our cumulative results, which you'll see this evening, and they provide us feedback. Their feedback is captured, and we try to look at the comments that are made in order to ensure that we've covered what we think we should be covering. Again, you can see a very diverse interdisciplinary team. You see, most importantly, parents, community members, board members, district staff, principals. We try to incorporate people who have different perspectives on the budgetary process. Next slide, please. Here's what we did on the 22nd. Obviously, we had some housekeeping to start the process. We had an opportunity for our deputies to speak, but more importantly, we had an opportunity for our superintendent to kick off the process, to give her opportunity to express to this interdisciplinary group her viewpoints. We had the deputies, after their presentation, go through a series of guiding questions, which would hopefully ping, and it did, some responses from our attendees to provide us additional insight on the budget. We were very fortunate this year to have the benefit of a moderator we've used for the third time, Mr. Marvin Bembry, exceptional gentleman. And we're glad that he has joined us. We thank him for his service to our district, to our students. And finally, we close today's session with Ms. Pogue providing us a next steps process. Next slide, please. This were the general comments provided by our superintendent. I want to leave that up for a second. I want to give you an opportunity to review it. Please pay attention to the second paragraph. The budget pathway that allows both the development of reserves, fiscal responsibility, and the provision for exceptional education. That's what we're attempting to do with this budget, with all budgets we generate for you and for our children. Third paragraph. Both educationally sound and fiscally responsible. That is our end aim. That's our institutional goal. Next slide, please. I spoke about Mr. Bembry. It's been a privilege for us to work with him. His resume is there. It's extremely extensive. He's worked with us. This is the third time, and we've been very successful with his tutelage as a moderator for us in the program. We'd like to thank him again for his service for the district and the service he's rendered to our children. I'll leave that for a second so the community can review it. Next slide, please. Here's the process we went through. It was a very action-packed day. Prior to the meeting, Mr. Chen and I set up the technical piece, make sure all the pieces were working. Ms. Polk joined us, so we spoke with our moderator to make sure everything was ready for when everyone arrived in our virtual environment. We started at 9 with the housekeeping. We went into individual divisions, providing our deputies the opportunity to speak. Our superintendent, again, provided us her guidance. We also had Mr. Bembry guide us through guiding questions, which were questions designed to push the envelope, to ping or to generate questions that the reviewers of this process might anticipate. So we took a break. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering, you're talking about the guiding questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Did we reserve those or preserve those questions?
Yes, we do. We have those. Those were shared with the committee prior to the session. All the attendees, and I believe obviously you were one, you had the guiding questions in there. We have those for our longitudinal purposes, yes, for our capital purposes.
Right, because I was just wondering about the entire board getting...
Would you like us to share that? We can do that.
Yeah, to get the questions so that they would be able to see
I can't.
some
No.
of the
Here.
questions that were asked.
The guiding questions? Can we post on the website? Is that your question, ma'am?
Okay, wait. Are you talking?
Typically, after we conduct the budget workshop, that information is posted on our district website because it's public information. And we could certainly go through the superintendent to share the recording of the committee meeting because we recorded that as well.
Okay, yeah, and I was just specifically talking about like the guiding questions and maybe some of the questions that came from out of the meeting.
We can make public the...
Right. We have the recording, and we also have, if you put questions in the chat box, if I'm understanding, we have those too. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
All that is retained for archival purposes.
Right.
So we go back and we listen to the tape to make sure we picked up everything that was shared with us.
I'm
Correct.
just speaking on behalf of the board, and I'm sure they would be interested
Okay.
in the different questions
All
that
right.
were asked.
We'll go through Ms. Polk and the superintendent, make sure that you have all the information that you would need.
Thank you.
Again, we built in breaks because virtual time, as we've all learned during the pandemic, moves very quickly. So we had a very aggressive schedule. We had a lot of cooperation, a very productive day. And as I mentioned before, for the public, so there's no confusion, we have a recording. We also have the questions that people put in the chat box for our archival purposes. We keep that. And then we had a debrief with the SBB team because we always want to know how we can improve. We want to make the process efficient and as timely as possible and meaningful for those who attend. So that's essentially what has happened in the vetting process. School improvement plans, department plans, reviewed by divisions, brought to the SBB, and you're seeing the cumulative vetting process with the superintendent overwatching the process coming to you. Okay.
And one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
EBB and SBB.
EBB?
What?
Oh, evidence-based funding. So EBF.
And
SBB, student-based budgeting.
Okay, it's different, right?
Yes.
And I'm just for the knowledge
Of the public.
Right. Could you maybe kind of briefly say
Okay.
what the differences are?
I'll leave the EBF to you. I'll talk about the SBB. SBB is an acronym we basically coined. The first year, if you remember, we had 4 schools. Then we went to 19 schools. Now the entire system is in SBB. SBB is the strategic budget planning process. That's essentially what it is. We are attaching resources to need. We're prioritizing our need and attaching resources to it. We're not just rolling over the budget. We are doing it eyes open, cognitively, with forethought to what our need may be. So that's what SBB is.
Okay.
Mr. LaWalta is going to speak more in detail about what evidence-based funding is.
Okay.
Which is a significant stream for us, revenue stream for us. I'll leave that to Mr. Loza. So with that, I'm going to yield the floor. Mr. Loza will walk you through what, for you 2 board members have already seen, the superintendent, the detail related to the ops, to ASAP, and then to the overall budget and the streaming. Mr. Loza.
Good evening. So I'm going to start out on the general state aid and evidence-based funding allocation slide. So this gives you a nice trend from 2022 on the left to 2012 on the right, how much our evidence-based funding and general state aid has increased by year. So you see in 22, basically we had $145 million of evidence-based funding. Going back down to 2012, it was about 69 million. So you can see how it's trended up over the years. The little bars, or what I'll call the nubs on the far right, is the increase from one year to the next. So this chart starts with 2012. So the increase from 12 to 13 was about $4 million. And you can see when you go from like 2017 to 2018, it jumped about $20 million. And you'll see that bar, that's the largest bar, was at $20 million. So those are the trends. The evidence-based funding itself started in 2018 and has continued, and general state aid was before that. Going to the next slide, basically we're going to note 2023 general state evidence-based funding is being the same as this year. The state has not come out with it, so right now we're projecting flat. But in order to get to it, we take our allocation and we subtract out what we give to or what the state gives to Learn Charter. It comes right out of our state aid calculation. And it's based on the enrollment of students that Learn Charter has. So at this point, we're budgeting or projecting $145,334,000 for evidence-based funding, which is no increase from FY22. Going to the next slide of financial trends, looking at the operating fund balances, which is makes up the education fund, operations and maintenance fund, transportation fund, and working cash fund. So we're going from all the way from 0809 down to FY22 23 projection, or 21-22 projection. And we're taking, say, education minus 12 million to positive 48 million over that time frame. And the totals of those four funds, we're going from a negative 2.8 million down to 89.2 million. 2.8 million was negative, and going down to 89.3 million. So good financial trend over the last 12, 13 years.
Brian, what was the last?
What's that?
What was the last year that we had to take out TAWs?
Ooh.
2008, 2009.
About 2008, 2009.
That was
So
the
about,
last time.
what, 14 years,
Okay.
which is good.
That's very significant.
All right, going to the next slide, FY22-23 summary of revenues and expenditures. We're noting the operating funds again. Now, keep in mind the operating funds of Education, Fund 10, Operations and Maintenance, Fund 20, Transportation, Fund 40, and Working Cash, Fund 70. That makes up our operating funds, and that's where we get our financial profile score from, these four funds. So we've got projected expenditures in the Ed Fund of $266 million, projected revenues of $259 million. So we got a little bit of a projected deficit, but we got a projected beginning balance as of July 1st, 2022 of $48.9 million. We've got we're going to transfer about $1,500,000 over to the tort fund, which will be on the next page. And come down to a projected ending balance in the Ed Fund of $41 million. So doing the same thing for Fund 20, basically ending up with a projected ending fund balance of $3.7 million in O&M. Fund 40, transportation, $5.1 million. Fund 70, $27.8 million. And grand total of the operating funds, $77.7 million. Going to the next slide of the other funds. Fund 30 is our debt service, where our bond and interest is in. Projected expenditures, $4.5 million. Revenues, $5.3 million. Beginning balance of $1.3 million, and an projected ending fund balance of $2.1 million in Fund 30. And Fund 50, Social Security, Medicare, and IMRF, projected ending fund balance of $4.8 million. Fund 60, which is capital projects, and Fund 90, which is life safety, we're noting a deficit of $12 million. And Fund 80 is the tort fund. We're noting about a $22,000 surplus on that. And you'll see where the $1,500,000 from Ed Fund is going into Fund 80, tort fund. The projected ending balance for these 5 funds, a negative $5 million. But overall, all funds, a positive fund balance of $72.6 million. Going to the next slide, where we have our goals and action steps for the various divisions and departments. You'll see ASAP goals and action steps of $34 million, all in Fund 10. School improvement plans, $24 million, again, all in Fund 10. And operations and maintenance, Fund 20 of $6.3 million. Capital projects, noting requesting $32 million, and that would be in Fund 60 and 90. And operations goals, $5.3 million, split amongst Fund 10, Fund 20, and Fund 40. Legal goals and action steps, $243 million, or $243,000, sorry. And our debt service fund, $4.5 million. And it notes the totals, subtotals of those various funds.
Mr. Luosa?
Yeah.
So for Fund 10, that's the fund where our teacher salaries and staff salaries get paid out, or is that a different fund?
Fund 10 is
Okay.
teacher salaries, yes.
Okay.
Going to some more budget requests on the next slide. We have academic supports and programs contracts, $22.3 million. General operating expenses, $5 million. Operations contracts, $19.6 million, spread amongst Fund 10, Fund 20, Fund 30, and Fund 40. Operations general operating expenses, $2.4 million, all in Fund 10. Superintendent general operating expenses, $539,000. Board of Ed general operating expenses, $147,000. And communications, $21,500. And we have the tort fund general operating expenses, $3.8 million over in the far right-hand corner. Okay, moving on to the next slide. We have budget request, education fund, this is salaries and benefits, $139.1 million, and that's all in Fund 10. So yeah, the bread and butter of that would be your teacher salaries. Operations and maintenance, $3.5 million. Transportation fund, $248,000. Tort, $1.1 million. And then it notes, below it notes the various benefits for IMRF, Social Security, Medicare.
Now, these are budget requests.
No, this is already basically existing staff.
Okay, this is the existing staff
Correct. Projection of existing staff salaries and benefits.
for 22-23.
Projection.
Projected, yes.
Okay.
Now, when you go to the next slide, where you see like the little mailbox of requests, that would be the request for new positions and stipends, $5,090,024. And the details for that can be found on that piece of paper that's going into the mailbox.
Can that link be shared with us?
Pardon?
Can that link be shared with us?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The link, okay.
Could the link be shared with us?
Yes, yes. That should be available, yeah. And now I'm going to turn it to Mr. Moten to do the operations side.
I got a question for you, Brian. Are we losing, are we gaining as far as charter school monies we happen to give to them?
We're giving more money to them?
Yes.
Yeah, so their enrollment is increasing a little bit, so we're giving more money to them.
So in essence, in one sense, that means we're kind of losing students to them coming here. Charter is getting them to some degree.
Not necessarily, because it's based upon our per pupil expenditure rate, based upon our last audit. I walked up and noticed. And so whatever that amount is per pupil is multiplying that times the enrollment. So the number might go up basically because our per pupil expenditures are higher.
So it doesn't mean, I understand
Yeah.
Mr. McBride's question. And the money follows the student.
Yes.
And so, because I looked at that $5,303,701, right? And it has increased
Yes.
from the beginning of when the charter school was first designated or put in, right?
Yes.
And we started at like 3 million.
Yes.
And now we are at that 5 million.
Yes.
Okay, and so my belief, okay, or what I thought, okay, was that because it's increasing, I understand that what you said about per pupil, okay, expenditures may have increased, but also that means that because our enrollment in the district has decreased, okay, over the last couple years, then the allotment for the charter school is going to increase.
And I would say again that that's not necessarily the case, but if you remember when we worked to prevent the charter school from even happening,
Right.
there was a plan that the charter schools submitted that it would be an incremental increase in their enrollment anyway. So there's really no way that we could compare it going up because we knew it was going to go up. It was in the basic application.
Right.
That they were going to increase every year when they added more grades.
Right.
But also a contributing factor would be what our per pupil expenditures are. So that would affect it as well. So that's why I answered it the way that I did.
Okay.
Because from quarter to quarter, when the superintendent gets the report and she gives it to me about what their enrollment is, sometimes their enrollment's going down.
Okay.
And our contribution for evidence-based goes down.
Okay.
So it's all contingent upon their enrollment at the time, each quarter, and also what the per pupil expenditures are based upon our annual financial report.
Okay, so Mr. McBride, you got that? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand it, but and also too, if they decide to buy a building, that means that their enrollment will go up, and that means we still, the money follows the student, correct?
The money does follow the student.
I got it.
But, we worked hard to prevent that from happening, but the state approved the application.
Right.
And so here it is.
But in the application, isn't there a cap? Isn't there a certain amount that they can't go over?
When they submitted their application, but I've not reviewed that since they were approved at the state level.
We were having that conversation, there's definitely, I remember there being a cap.
Yes.
Can we get that to the board? Because I think there's a number that they
Okay.
can't go over.
All right. Mhm.
And the state never put charter schools on their own line item? Like people, like the schools were requesting?
They do get their own line item in their system, but it is reducing our allocation. Because those students, even though they go to that charter school, they're really within the boundaries of our district.
Right.
I think just to add on that, not to detract in any way, but for the reasons that you're saying, Ms. Hannah and Mr. McBride, I think it was really important for the community to know that we absolutely want parents to have a choice in where they send their kids to school, but it splits the money that our educational districts get in general. And they don't have an elected school board to oversee them. They're a private entity that can make their own decisions and their own standards. And we actually have, visibility in the community, and people can come to us and talk to us. So, there's pros and cons to it, and that's the complexity of it.
All right, good evening, members of the board, superintendent, staff, community. I want to thank the business office, as always, for bringing this information forward and pulling together the budget committee. All right, so I want to give a brief overview of some of the operations division request for the upcoming budget fiscal year. Next slide, please. So you'll see noted on this slide a breakdown between funds 10, 20, 40, and 60 as it relates to each department within the division. I do want to give a few initiatives that are taking place within these different departments, so you have an idea of what makes up these numbers. First off, business and financial services. We have in Fund 10 $2.3 million. A majority of that, $2 million of that, is a contingency to support the district as the fiscal agent to ensure that all of the initiatives throughout the entire district can be sustained if there is any fluctuations in funding or contractual obligations for the various departments. We also have a contingency within that dollar amount for our ERP system, which is our iVisions software. Under the deputy line, the $125,000. So there's three specific initiatives there. One is accountability through time and attendance pilot program for next year. This is sign in, sign out for staff at the building level. It's also the salary analysis that was recently approved by the Board of Education, so that can happen and take place with recommendations prior to next school year. And then really updating the 10-year capital improvement plan. As we're completing year 3, we're going into year 4. That's a 10-year plan. That plan, how it looks, as well as the initiatives, do need to be updated based on change in priorities over the course of the last 3 years. In our crisis intervention and safety area, we have $2.3 million identified in Fund 10, and that's for various initiatives such as including vape detectors at Brookside campus as well as the 5 middle schools, updating camera systems, replacing IDs, supplies, x-ray machines, metal detectors, video surveillance cameras, so system upgrade as well as equipment additions or replacement, training initiatives. Some of them we recently brought forward to the Board of Education for this department, as well as ensuring that our staff at the building level are CPI trained for verbal de-escalation and physical restraint. I do want to make a note here, and you'll see a footnote at the bottom of the slide that we have 15 FTE identified in this area. However, 10 of the 15 are substitute safety officers. They are not FTE. They're substitutes to fill in when we have absences or vacancies throughout the department. 4 of these individuals have recently been approved by the Boards of Education. This is full-time safety staff at Washington campus. So that's 4. And then the last one of the 15 is a third full-time school resource officer to support the middle schools. And again, this was a request of the department based on the current use of the school resource officer that's within the district at this time. So that makes up the total 15, 5 full-time, 1 is a contractual obligation, 4 will be district staff, and 10 would be substitutes. Yes, Ms. Hannah.
You talked about the x-ray machines under your crisis and safety. Now, are we, in using those machines, and I'm going to say at the high school level, we don't have them at the middle school, right?
That's correct. The 2 high school campuses and AOEC.
And are all of the egresses at the egress doors and so forth, or are they kind of sporadically put in the buildings?
So they're not sporadic, and I should have said this earlier. We do have team members here to answer specific questions because of the budget detail. There's a lot within these numbers, but no, they're strategically put at the buildings based on the identified student and visitor entrances. So the student entries, the visitor entries, we have X-ray metal detectors at those 3 locations.
Okay.
So they're not at every single door.
Right. And so, okay, that's fine. And also within your budget, you included, I'm sure, about repairs, maintenance to those machines and so forth, because there's the machines, some of them don't work, and we also should be having warranties and all of that on those machines as well, and insurances. And so I'm just wondering, within your crisis and safety budget request, is all of that included in there?
Yes, ma'am. And that's an excellent question, because we don't want the systems and equipment to be down. So we have repair and maintenance costs built within the budget, as well as preventive maintenance agreement for a company to come out and do preventive maintenance on the machines instead of just reactive. But there is a cost associated with reactive or corrective maintenance if a machine goes down, as well as if we need to replace a machine, which we hope that doesn't happen, but it could happen. That's tied to the budget, but a repair maintenance contract as well as a budget allotted to that is within the document where we have that equipment. All the sites we have that equipment.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Alton, could you clarify for me, did I hear you say that there was going to be an SRO now assigned to the middle schools, and that he was going?
Yeah, Mr. Riddle, your mic is not active.
Oh, is it working now?
Oh, yes.
Yep. Could you clarify for me, did I hear correctly that you said there would be an SRO assigned to the middle schools, and that would go to all the different middle schools?
Yeah, so currently that is within the budget request.
Okay.
A third SRO has not been appointed at this time. Obviously, that's a contractual obligation and request through the Waukegan Police Department MOU, but that is being requested based on, our SROs currently serve the high school campuses, but they can be called to assist at any district facility. So this would provide flexibility, because when we remove an SRO out of the high school to respond to another situation throughout the district, we're taking them away from the high school. So the goal here would be, we have SROs at the high school, 1 at each campus. Ideally, they would be there all day or majority of the day, and then a third would roam throughout the district. and focus at the middle schools.
Right, and that's been a request of the principals of the middle schools? Is that why it's being done?
Yeah, that's been a request actually of Mr. Wilson's department. And in the past, the district did have more than 2 school resource officers in the distant past. So this would just help with responsiveness for the other situations we've seen throughout the district.
Right, okay, good, thank you.
And Mr.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Mr. Rex, I hear you talking about these machines, these X-ray machines. And this is one of the reasons why I come here, because I think this is where we lack in the community, because you guys don't get to see what we see. If we put them in the high schools, we know we do not have enough safety officer to monitor each door of entrance in the high school. So if you do not have those doors locked, and I'm gonna give you an example, because I went to Brookside. When you go in cafeteria C, when I visited the high school both times, when you go in that door, there's a roundabout, right? There's a dump off. You only got 2 safety officers up in there. You can't see that area. So if you got 2 there, you got one at the door and one over here. But that door back there by cafeteria C, there's no staff there. I watched kids come in and out of there. So what I'm saying is that we short security for that. And we put these X-rays machines in the high schools, which they need to go into junior high schools as well. I think we know that. Why aren't we putting them at every entrance in the door if we cannot lock those doors? We don't have no chains to lock them on there, right?
Sure. So thank you. And I don't know if everybody heard Mr. Edwards' question. It was about locking doors and lack of staffing, the need for additional staff at the high school and some of the areas that have a lack of coverage, for lack of a better word. So we do have card reader system, and this is an example of one right here. What we call a check-it device at the high school campuses, so individuals should be able to use their ID to swipe in and out. Now, they should be locked unless they have an ID, or it'll send off an alert where the buzzers are saying somebody's opening and closing the door when they shouldn't be. We recently did a safety audit, and we requested the board to do a safety audit, and that's going to be one of several vulnerability assessments where we're going to be looking at staffing levels at the school as well as our video surveillance camera locations to help support in some of the areas that may be identified as soft areas or areas where we don't have full coverage that might compromise the safety of the building. But our check-it devices on the doors at the schools should be operating. Those doors should be locked unless somebody has an ID or it sends an alert with a siren that says somebody has accessed the door and they don't have credentials to unlock it.
Just to kind of, I guess, add to that, Mr. Moten, and I you know, if the board wants to keep going and we save our comments for later, we can absolutely do that.
Okay.
But I think that I've been pretty vocal in the community about how I feel about SROs being in the schools, and when I was in middle school, we had SROs as well. You know, Officer Luca was really, really great, and she worked with a lot of people that I was friends with at the time. But I would prefer the request be for more safety officers rather than a contract to the police department, because they are already full-time staff. If we can somehow make the contract be, you know, that they stay within a certain radius of the schools, if we need to contact them, you know, I would prefer that. But at you know, to Mr. Edwards' point, I think if you know, it's a safety issue with the different exits in the building, or if we just need to make a certain rotation within our buildings, like, I would be more comfortable having that be the request. You don't have to say yes or no now, but that's for the board to understand my ask.
That's fine. We thank you for the feedback, because that's something we're always reviewing. And to what Mr. Edwards said, the staffing levels, I believe it was said at a previous meeting by the board president and the superintendent that we'll be doing that review at Brookside campus, just like at Washington campus, from a staffing standpoint.
Yes.
So, thank you for the feedback.
And one other question.
When you say review, what do you mean by review? Y'all gonna be assessing, seeing if you need more staff?
Yes. So coverage either with staff, video surveillance, or other forms of equipment.
Okay, so the last question was this. So, I'm just trying to help myself understand this so I can tell my community, or how to explain it to the community. If we have lost staff and we're not able to retain staff, have we identified why? And so my question to you is, we know it's because we're not competitive, right? Pay-wise. So how do you guys plan on getting more staff in here when we already short most ones? You guys been searching and looking, nobody is really coming forward, right? Because of pay. At what point do you board members, administration decide to say, because I know you guys go to the stores and things of that nature, so you're watching things go up. Now, for somebody in your position, your insurance may be paid for, theirs is not. They have to pay for those. You see what I'm saying? In you guys' positions, the board may pay for your education, but we're not paying for theirs. I mean, please help me understand that, because we want to know this. This is really bothering us.
And so you're asking about the pay increase?
Yes, because if we do not increase the pay, we're not going to be able to retain nobody. Other districts that's right next door to us is paying more than us. And I don't know if you guys realize that, but it's the conversation in the community. This is why nobody's coming here. We're losing a lot.
So I hear what you're saying, and that has been mentioned at previous meetings. Is that a general question, or is it related to the safety department? Is it just a general question, or is it related to the safety staff?
Respectfully, sir, if you have to answer that, ask me that. There's no need for an answer. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer anyway, because we've discussed that. The district and the board has expressed providing a fair, comparable, equitable wage to staff to ensure that that is not a deterrent for individuals coming into our district. That is an initiative within our HR division, as well as the superintendent and the Board of Education, as we're bargaining collective bargaining agreements and doing a salary review for our non-union staff. But just a general answer, that is something that we are looking into, whether it's base salary, additional incentives, stipends, and contributions towards insurance and retirement benefits.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. And since we've answered that, because I've tried to let it go, the other problem is we've sat on this board and we made a promise about giving the staff 4 days. If we are months later, they still haven't got it. So what I'm saying to you guys is these meetings are watched on YouTube. Everybody sees them. When you say something and don't follow through with it, that is the #1 discouraging factor of us keeping people here. So when is this staff going to get them days that they was promised because the administration got it? That's been done and we're still waiting on it, board. Please, y'all.
Incentives.
And we said, you know, the board president stated, he asked the superintendent to get back with him and let him know when this was going to be done. This was months ago. You know, and we're here now getting ready to go to the end of the year, and we still have not done that. So I'm asking the Board of Education, when?
Yeah, right.
How long is this staff going to have to wait for that?
Right, right. Okay, Mr. Edwards, we thank you for your comment, but realize we are in a budget meeting right now, and this is just our first budget meeting. And the board has never made a promise. There was never a promise that we were going to increase everyone's wages.
No,
that was a suggestion.
A promise of an increase.
There was talk about it. There was never a promise.
I said about the days that the board granted the administration. So we were talking about the salaries and things, and that came as in a tie-in on why we can't keep people, right? So when you guys gave the administration those days during the break, we asked here at public comment, will the teachers get that?
Yes.
You guys said yes.
No, we never said yes. There was
Yes, you did.
the board president.
Before I came back here today, and
Okay,
that's why
all right,
I'm here, because
all right. Well, the board president isn't here right now, but
you're the vice president.
yes,
You don't
yes,
know
and I don't remember the board president making a promise to the community that everyone was going to get a raise, that or get a time or get 4 days off. He was going to look into that.
So can I give a comment?
Go ahead.
Just because I want to keep going, because we are going to talk about this. Incentives that are not yet budgeted is listed in this budget, and that kind of goes into what you guys are saying. And I know that the community doesn't always know how bargaining units work, but if you're part of a unit, your leadership comes to our administration with a request some of which includes what you guys are saying. But if it's allotted for the year and we're in these conversations in the summer for the next year, that's when.
You as a Board of Education can request to sit down with any of those bargaining units and say, we have this proposal to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vukovic.
All right, thank you.
And can I finish my question regarding the warranties? And I just want to expand. And we also are carrying some type of insurance on our equipment and such, right?
So we do get insurance plans with new equipment, and as things age over time, that's why we get the preventive maintenance plans to keep them operable.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Similar to the mechanical equipment and other large purchases that we've done over the years. So if I could continue on.
Yes.
We have, Mr. White, could you go back one more, please? Thank you. Operations and maintenance, we don't reflect anything here, but they're going to be on the next slide for other expenses as well as the capital improvement plan for this year. Transportation and child nutrition, some initiatives there. Replacement equipment throughout the cafeterias in the district. New menu items, food items we want to introduce throughout the year on a quarterly basis to the students, as well as a bus accident reenactment software that Ms. Williams' teams wants to implement for next year. Next slide, please. Again, these are some other expenses for each area. We have them primarily in the Ed Fund, O&M, and the Transportation Fund. We have professional development within this area, as well as general supplies and materials. We have additional equipment upgrades and licensure fees in the crisis and safety area. In the transportation and food service area, we have gasoline, we have bus repair and maintenance, and all the items associated with the district supplies and transportation that we need to maintain. We also have within this slide on operations and maintenance, $6.3 million, almost $6.4 million. That's a lot of the supplies and materials that the department uses to do work orders, preventive maintenance, replace belts on mechanical equipment, paint supplies, plumbing supplies, all of those items, as well as contractual obligations for purchase services from our utility providers, gas, water, and electricity, are within that number. Next slide, please. Yes, ma'am.
If you go back to the last slide.
Thank you.
Okay, operation and maintenance, okay? And this may be a comprehensive question in reference to our water system, water heating system, because I know I keep getting questions, concerns, complaints regarding the hot water in the buildings. And are we planning to make sure our water heating systems in our buildings are working properly? Okay, because that needs to be addressed. And it's not like it is one or two buildings or anything like that. And I know that our buildings are old. I do also know that we have spent millions on putting boilers, new boilers in our buildings. And in terms of hot water, okay, which is the most sanitary for washing hands and so forth, we need a plan to take and we need to set aside money so that we can actually look at our water heating system in our buildings. And I'm hoping that, I don't know if it's included in this budget request, but I certainly would hope that somewhere it's there.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hannah. There are a lot of items within this $6.4 million for the operations team for day-to-day requirements in addition to the capital improvements. I do recall several years ago, I believe it was the 2015-16 school year, we did plumbing upgrades at several schools, and I know Mr. Kruckerberg is here so he could speak to it as well. But in that, we identified specific locations that required plumbing upgrades throughout the schools because per our 10-year life safety survey, plumbing code requires that that be current. So we identified that at several schools. At the time, I believe Mr. Weddle was the student board member. And he brought up the same concern at Brookside campus, and we had the operations team meet with him and the principal at the time and walk the school so he understood how the domestic water system worked within the school. So if we're next to a water heater, which I believe is what you're referencing, if you're within a short distance, water heats up quickly. If you're on the second floor, 80 feet down the hall, it takes a little while for the hot water to get there. But as those requests come, if they are isolated, which at this point I believe they all are, we address them in a timely manner with our operations team, which is why we have a plumbing supply budget here. The boiler systems we have been updating, and the 3 boiler systems are currently being updated now at Greenwood, Whittier, and Washington. That heats up the water that feeds the heating system, not the domestic that individuals are washing their hands in the bathroom. So we've updated those, but also the water heaters throughout the district to address the domestic concerns that may be reported. And that's something we're always going to be monitoring, Ms. Hannah.
Yeah, because it's a constant concern and complaint, regarding that. And so I just certainly hope that, that with all of the renovations and all the plans to do whatever, I would hope that we are looking at that.
Absolutely. And if there's any isolated concerns, Mr. Kruckerberg's team is happy to address them with our plumbing staff, so that type of situation doesn't have to wait to be repaired if it's isolated in an individual room or office or restroom space. So thank you.
I was just going to ask, is that radiator heat? Those boilers? Is that radiator heat those boilers?
So we've been putting in univents in the buildings, Mr. McBride. So hot water, cold water systems, univentilators to blow the hot and cold air. We're trying to move away from the steam systems.
Okay, yeah, because I heard you say it wasn't related to the heat, the faucet heat. I mean, faucets. That's why I asked him, was that radiator heat?
Yeah, so we have radiators in this building, but we're trying to move away from that in the school locations.
Okay.
I believe I have 2 slides left. So we have some contractual obligations here in Fund 10, 20, 30, 40, and 80. A few things to point out here in the business and financial service area, the bond principal and interest payments, property tax adjustments, our security exchanges and commissions, our skip insurance payments and things of that nature between debt service fund and the tort fund. We have contractual obligations, what Ms. Hannah mentioned earlier regarding preventive maintenance of our equipment, camera systems, contractual obligations for items such as agility recovery. I'm throwing out a few things you may not hear about too often, which is a service that provides temporary office classroom space. If we have an emergency at a school, we utilize them when we had the water main shut down at Oakdale a few years ago. So those are the contractual obligations within the crisis and safety area. And then in our human resources area, again, we have insurance requirements there that cover the district. The risk management pieces are within the HR area. Our transportation and food service, we have in the Ed Fund our contract with Preferred Mills. We have in transportation our contract with Illinois Central, as well as our service agreement with Pace and Safeway. And then in the O&M Fund 20 for transportation and child nutrition, we have 2 items, pest control services and sanitation services for our waste hauling, trash service.
Costs that much?
Yes. We do a lot of pickups at the schools for trash service, Ms. Hannah, multiple a week, to keep up with the waste generated from general trash, breakfast, lunch, and snacks.
And why in the transportation and food service, why is the 7+ million in the education fund?
The food service is paid out of the ed fund, Ms. Hannah.
And transportation as well?
So transportation is going to be in Transportation Fund 40, which is the 5th column on the right. So the
I see that. Okay.
So we have food service paid out of Fund 10 for Ms. Williams' department, Preferred Mills, and Illinois Central contract paid out of Fund 40.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Moulton, can you talk a little bit more about Fund 20, right? That looks to be about a $290,000 increase, and you talked a little bit about sanitation and other waste, so I'm just trying to understand where that significant increase is coming from. It can't be cost of living.
Sure. So that's really just a projection. So this year, we brought all students back. We obviously did not spend as much in this area when the buildings were closed for remote learning or hybrid learning, but it's really just a projection because costs have gone up. So the gas for the trash trucks to come pick up, some schools get service 3 times a week, some 4 times a week, some 5 times a week. They also have staff that they're going to pay an increased wage, so we're really just projecting at this point. Pest control services are also done on a scheduled basis. Their costs have gone up for their supplies, traps, things like that, as well as their staffing costs. We also have ancillary services for pest control throughout the year that we can't predict. So if we have a concern brought forward by a school that we have activity, rodent control, instead of them coming once a week, we might ask them, or instead of them coming once a month, we might ask them to come once a week to check traps and lay bait in various items. Also, if we have a situation where we get a report of bed bugs, for instance, they provide an additional service which would fall within this cost. So those are things, it could happen 0 times a year, or it could happen 20 times a year. It hasn't happened 20 times a year, but I'm just saying we're kind of trying to capture that cost here because there is a level of unpredictability within some of those additional services.
And that's inclusive of arborists, such as like Asian bugs on our trees or something like that. Is that inclusive of that in this fund as well?
So the arborist, that we come to have inspect our trees would actually be on the previous slide in Fund 20.
Okay.
O&M fund.
Mr. Moulton,
Yes, sir.
can I just ask you, is there any cost in there? I know I see some paper recycling bins at some of our schools. Do we make an attempt to separate the paper and try to put it in those bins instead of having it put in, the trash?
We make attempts. Paper, glass, things like that. We make attempts.
Okay, but we don't actually have an official recycling program in our schools.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to what type of volume we do on a regular basis. I would have to research that, but this actually originated from one of our high school students at Washington campus when Mr. Hill first got there that wanted to start a recycling program. So we did ask our waste hauling company if we could have the option at multiple locations throughout the district. At some of the schools, you've seen some of the regular trash bins as well as the recycled trash bins. But I would need to come back to you with specific volume, but we do make attempts to separate when we can and separate that waste.
Okay, just go ahead, Ms. Hanna. No, I think I'm done. I just think at some point in the future, we'd like to be able to see that our kids are aware of that, and maybe even composting. I don't know. That again, that takes a lot. I know sometimes that costs more money than just to put it in the trash, but it is something that's important, and we want to teach our kids to, make sure they're doing that at home, and that some of them are composting even. So anyway, it's something to be discussed further down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback.
One more question, and I don't know where it would go under here. But you know the tunnels that we have?
At Washington campus?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we doing anything with those? Are we using them? I guess maybe what are we doing with them? And is any of that stuff included in the budget?
Storage.
Yeah.
So I would need to follow up, Ms. Hannah. The tunnels that, and just to be clear, the tunnels you may be referring to are the tunnels that really aren't meant to be occupied, you know, where the dirt is, those areas. We're just locking the doors. We do have servicemen go in there to do repairs, particularly on the plumbing system, but those aren't meant to be occupied spaces.
Is that the area, I think we do, some of those areas, we do store some stuff down there, right?
So we have like our weight room and places like that at the bottom of Washington campus, but I believe what you might be referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, are the unoccupied spaces that are on the same level as some of those rooms, but they are not finished spaces. They're crawl spaces, they're dirt spaces, there's only mechanicals running through them. So you can't store anything there, you can't have class in there, you can't have office space in there. I mean, it's just dirt.
A liability.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and what is more important to me, it brings to mind if okay, you talked about the pest control and all that stuff. Are we making sure that we're doing that in that space? Because I mean, it's it would be a space for gathering of rodents and wildlife and all that stuff. And I'm just giving food for thought, you know, because we get little critters in our schools and stuff like that, but we just need to make sure that that is not an access point into our school.
So we got tunnels running up under,
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I wonder, board members, if we're getting a little bit off track.
Yeah.
No,
I wanted to.
I did not know that.
I wanted to make sure the question was answered, Mr. McBride, but we do have some unfinished spaces at Washington campus that should only be accessed by individuals doing repairs.
That's all. I'm just saying I didn't know it. It's good to know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for the feedback, Ms. Hannah. We'll confirm those spaces are being addressed because they are adjacent to classroom spaces.
Right.
Okay. I wonder if we as a board, though, want to, I'm looking at the time, it's 7:15, and we're only about halfway through this budget workshop, so do we want to maybe hold questions until the presenter finishes? Would that possibly get us out of here?
I'm not worried about getting out of here. I'm worried about getting the questions asked and answered.
Okay. How does the rest of the board feel?
mean-
You want to continue the way we're going? Because it seems like we're taking a little bit too much time, and we're going to not finish by 8 o'clock. How do the rest of you feel? Charlotte, how do you feel? You want to continue this way?
I'd like to hold the questions till the end, maybe.
Till the end of the
answer will
presenter?
be,
Okay. What about you, Lucy?
In the further
Yeah.
slide.
All right, Lucy?
I actually like the questions in between the during the presentation, because it's fresh off the mind,
Well,
so that's where
I've
might.
asked 2 questions. One pertaining to the chartering school, and I just wanted to know. I didn't know we had tunnels. That's it. That's all. But it's good to know. Now, other than that, if I have a question, I'm going to answer it. But for the most part, I've seen what's already going to be presented already, and if I really had questions or anything, I would have called the board president or either, but again, like I said, other individuals have questions, they need to answer. They need to ask the questions.
All right, okay. So it looks like we have 3, so I think we've got, and Ms. Gonzalez, you want to?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I'd rather have like the discussion about salaries and other academic related items.
Right away during the presentation or?
In the middle.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's continue then.
But
the way
brief
we are.
questions.
Okay.
All
Mr.
right.
Moulton, you want to continue?
Thank you, Mr. Riddle. So I only have one more slide for my area, and this This slide is a summary of everything that I've discussed up to this point. The only additional item is the capital projects Fund 60 column. As Mr. Luosa mentioned earlier, the finance team is requesting a reduction of about $12 million for this budget request. But the capital improvements, that's the column where the Capital Improvement Committee has come forward with recommendations to support the capital improvement plan, as well as any supplemental funding from grants and other donations that might go into this, that Ms. Tate's team, Ms. Tate, as well as Ms. Polk, the rest of her team, academics team, et cetera, various team members have worked to support. Some of these projects have already come forward to the Board of Education. For example, the HVAC projects I mentioned earlier, as well as we have this Fund 60 being supplemented by the ESSER 2 funds for the Johnson Control scope of work that's taking place throughout the district. So I did want to highlight that there. The other columns are consistent with what I mentioned in the previous 3 slides.
So just to be clear, right, what is in red and in the cell box, that is already the projected reduction number, or that number still needs to be reduced? Okay.
Yeah, the total number is the one at the bottom of the screen,
Mm-hmm.
32 million.
32.7.
The business office is recommending a reduction to what's in the cell, the 2.9 million, or 22.9 million.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that clarification.
And it's not all ESSER money, right?
No. So this is capital projects. I just wanted to make a reference because we have a lot of things touching capital projects fund, but the ESSER 2 fund for the Johnson Controls work was roughly 75% ESSER 2, 25% capital projects. So we're capturing some cost for various initiatives within this fund that are capital improvement related to make sure that we're leveraging all of our dollars to continue our capital efforts. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I believe the next slide, I'll turn it over to Dr. Cesario. Thank you.
Thank you, LeBaron. Good evening, board members, superintendent, members of the community. Good evening. Before I start, I do want to express my gratitude to our teachers during this Teacher Appreciation Week, so thank you so much for everything that you do. I'd also like to thank the finance team for working closely with them, my team, and our principals. This was a reflective process that we really started in earnest around October to really make sure that we were prepared so that we could have our budgets ready for the principals to review, so that we could see if there were any redundancies, any areas where we could cover the costs that schools were allocating funds for, and to see if to check those redundancies within our departments and also at schools. So we were able to really reduce the redundancies and be more efficient with our dollars. So if we talk about the school requests, these school requests were all aligned to their school improvement plans. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see that here are the school's budget requests, and they vary. And the variation that you see, part of it is based on size, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that some of these schools are also engaging in projects like new gymnasiums, new playgrounds, or they might be putting in new sound systems, or adding additional tech or software solutions. So that's why you'll see the variations in some of the costs. Again, has to do with the size of the school, but also has to do with some of the projects that they have planned and laid out and collaborated with the operations division and or IT or other members of the finance team here.
Well, before you go
sure.
That I am I'm just really amazed at the small amount of requests from Benny. That I don't even understand that.
And so some of these costs may be picked up. We can look into that for you further, but some of the costs.
No, I'm just looking.
Sure. Just to explain though, again, and that's why I said there was some variation in going through that process, making sure that we were finished with the department's budgets so that we can showcase these to the principals to make sure that we could cover any costs where necessary. I can't speak to the specifics of Benny. We can follow up on that. But again, that's part of the variation too, is that some of these schools have larger projects, some are contributing more depending on what it is, and some are being picked up by other departments. Superintendent?
So I'm looking at Little Fort here, and it's $3 million. So are we talking, is that capital improvements included in that amount?
Yes.
Okay, so we know that Jack Benny had a lot of work. I'm just trying to rationalize
Right.
in my mind, right? So we know that Jack Benny had the curtain wall and painting, and so some of these others.
And windows and some other things over the course of,
So,
yeah.
so the amounts there, like in the millions, does include the capital improvement component of it also.
That's correct.
Not only the.
And/or funding from IT.
But Superintendent, can I ask a question? No, we just heard about all of the capital improvement and everything, and this specifically is for academic supports and programs. So why would those dollar amounts be included in to academic supports and programs? That kind of is.
I could turn it over to the team, but if my educated guess is the team is trying to show how much they are spending on each school operationally and academically, and I can see Gwen shaking her head, but Mr. Moulton, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely correct, Superintendent. So the two differences in the capital requests are from the operations standpoint. They're district level priorities and needs, infrastructure related. For the site-based budget requests through the principals, we ask them to do things like playground equipment, classroom furniture, some of the things that have been brought forward to the board recently for approval, to continue those items to build the culture and climate of the schools that would historically be purchased through the operations department.
And similarly on the IT side, like sound systems, something like that for a gymatorium, that would also have been included here.
Okay, so this is kind of like a total amount.
For the school request, excluding the positions, and again, there are variances in what we're seeing here because most of it is related to these capital and or IT projects, and that's what this slide represents.
So where's the?
We're going to go on in the next few slides. We'll talk about some of the other pieces.
Because
sure.
That's what I'm looking for.
We can, as we go through the presentation, it's broken down into contracts and some other areas, and we'll give a high-level overview of those.
Okay.
I do like this slide, though. It shows the school communities, what exactly is being spent on each school. So nice job, finance.
Yeah, this is good. Right.
Okay, so moving on. Again, this is, I have a different deck in front of me, but you're going to see that the goals and action steps, these are related to specific goals that the department's created. So as I mentioned before, it wasn't only that each department established a budget, but they also presented internally to us and then to the principals. So all of these are goals and actions that are aligned to our strategic priorities in the district and also within our department, within the division of ASAP. And so some of this you'll see the costs related to some of our initiatives like curriculum writing and or some other projects. Our Aspiring Leaders program, if you look at the school leadership budget and why it's $316,000, a large portion of that really has to do with professional development, and then again our Aspiring Leaders program. So that's just an example there, and that's a grand total of $34,592,975.
Aspiring Leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That's with the kids, with the students.
So under school leadership, that's our area superintendents. It's with part of this was a strategy to recruit and retain and develop our own leadership within the district. So this is something that was started 4 years ago when I started, and that was part of it is having a principal leadership team, and the other component was to really develop and recruit aspiring principals, aspiring assistant principals, and so you'll see that that helps to pay for professional development and tuition. It's been a very successful program in the fact that we've been able to move a lot of assistant principals into principal positions and other folks into leadership positions across the district.
There was also a request from the board to be able to have a bench for our employees and have upward mobility within the organization.
That's correct.
Right. Mr. Edwards, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm looking at this here, what's on the screen, and I'm noticing with the face department and outreach department, the amounts and the big difference. I'm really not understanding with all that outreach do. I'm quite sure they asked for way more money than this.
So thanks for asking that question. This again is just one slide, and that's not the total amount that they requested. You're absolutely right. This is just related to this one piece of some of the goals that they established, right? And so it's not the total amount. So thanks for helping me clarify. I just want to point this out so that people at home really understand this. If you look at it at the top of the title slide, it'll say ASAP goals and action steps. And so as we move on to the next slides, it'll talk about contracts and other things. But it is, you're right, each slide is not fully inclusive of the total budget, but represents one aspect of it. And again, you're going to see variances like you did in the previous slide with some of the schools, because some departments are working on different projects and some are more expensive than others, but their funding is allocated in different manners.
And I just wanted, in reference to outreach, I want to also indicate that.
Sorry, yeah, we just need a mic so we can capture everything that you're saying so the folks at home can hear it.
Respond to your question with outreach. I just wanted to indicate, hello. I just wanted to indicate that outreach is one of those departments that has received a grant of $239,000. So that number there may be indicative of the support that the district provides outreach in addition to that $239,000 grant that they received.
Okay. Are there any more questions on this slide? Otherwise, I'll just move forward.
I have one.
Yes.
One very briefly. Why is math? I'm assuming middle school and high school math separated from the teaching and learning line items.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not? Is it like a separate initiative that we're requesting for?
It is not a separate initiative. One of the things that we're actually, it's PD specifically related to lesson study.
Okay.
That's a large portion of it. Okay. And so that's a big portion of it. A number of our teachers are involved in it, and that's probably why it's highlighted. Okay. It's not, I don't want to say it's separate because it is aligned to the work that we're doing, to the goals of ASAP and to the goals of the district. But excellent question, but that has to do with the lesson study and our partnership with DePaul University.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And could you explain the bilingual and multicultural request versus the diverse learner / special education, and
sure.
It seemed the diverse learner, it seemed a little
low. Yeah. So same thing that when Mr. Edwards posed that question, this isn't indicative of their total budget. If you see it on subsequent slides, you'll see that it's quite larger. But for this specific area and what they're doing, so just like Board Member Gonzalez asked about why is this pulled out, the middle school and high school math, and it's related to the professional development. So some of the professional development they're working on, so for diverse learners, an example is they are doing co-teaching. That's just one example of one stream of PD that they're working on, but that might be included here. But it is not indicative of their total budget. So as we move on, you'll see that it's quite a bit larger. Yes.
And so
Yes. And so is bilingual and multicultural education too. You'll see that there's more to the budget. That's just this particular aspect.
Okay, and does that, is that also the same thing for technology?
Same thing too, right?
So
because we know that.
More than 11 million? Well, just about 12 million?
Well, we see that, yeah, there's, depending on where it fell in to the budget, right? Again, this happens to be part of their goals, right? So that's a line there.
Okay.
Okay. And I apologize, I keep looking back and forth because my deck is not fully aligned with this one, so. That's okay. That's all right, thanks. Any more questions on this slide? Okay, next slide, please. And again, here, you'll see that this is other expenses. So if we look at the title here, and this might have to do with supplies, it might have to do with sub-coverage, it may have to do with others. Again, there is variances in what you're seeing. It's not because one is getting more than the other, it's just how their programs have align their dollars depending on what their needs are in certain areas. And that's $5,216,000 there. And then under contracts, which should be the next slide. And here we're talking about, if you look at the diverse learners, now you're seeing a larger allocation of funds. So one of the things that would come out of this is something like separate day placement, our contracts with those folks from Ombudsman, from Menta, and other places, and sometimes if we have to contract with other folks to assist with varying roles. But again, you see that that's a much larger number, especially under DL. And then when we look at IT, that's a lower number here, and a lot of this has to do with services, software, and maintenance. The total here, $22,302,369. Next slide, please. And then our total, again, excluding existing positions, $86,682,815.
Question.
Yes, Ms. Leguizamo.
Thank you for the presentation on this. More of a comment on this one or a request, right? I'd like to see if the team can please give us an update on the middle school redesign.
Yes. Yeah, actually, thank you for bringing that up just really quickly. You're going to get updates on a number of our plans. High school transformation, I know that's one that's been requested and asked, and we've been working on it with additional teachers, with admin. This has been it's been a process. So yes, we will be sharing those. We'll talk. Okay.
Okay, and the things that's kind of flagged for me so that you know where I'm going with this is in the the school improvement plans.
Yes.
That was presented. I noticed that there was one middle school compared to the other middle schools that had a lot less actionable goals under their umbrella. And so I'd like to understand if that particular school is more further down the line, and that's what we're seeing there. We're also seeing it, what you have presented here in regards to the school building line items. So that's one of the reasons why I pinpointed the middle school redesign and what that looks like, and trying to fully understand why are some actionable goals and resources not at all of the middle school when all the middle school redesign is supposed to kind of go
So the one stream of work, just to really keep it very brief, because we're not going into a full, explanation of the plan, but this year, one of the goals was to really work on student voice. So each school establishing a student council and then having a general council where all of the students would meet was one of the goals. And there are schools that have individual goals, and some schools are further along in how they're embracing middle level philosophy and other things. And some of them have already started before the inception of a middle school redesign plan. But yes, that is one of the pieces. One of the other things that we're going to focus on next year is a stream of PD. And again, I'll talk more about that at another time, but just to give you an example of what we were doing this year. And we have shared the plan in prior years, and we've adjusted because of the pandemic and other things, and we have some other adjustments that we're going to share, because what we try to do is we have a number of 5-year plans. We try to align them all so they look the same visually and we're speaking the same language, and that they were all timed out along the new, what will be the new strategic plan.
Right.
So it just makes sense. So we'll have a preview of a lot of that. The high school transformation plan, the goal to get that done was May 30th. And so we'll give a preview. I can't promise every detail being totally worked out, but the goal is to have all of these plans finished by May 30th. And so all those respective teams have been working on those diligently. So thank you for asking about that.
And so general overall question, right, is compared to last year, right, this is a $20 million addition to what you're looking at this year, right? It's various years, it's different what it looked like last year compared to this year, right? So I'd just like to ask you, what have you considered in all of this, like your big wins that you like out of what you see in this plan so far? And I don't know if you've done this assessment or not either, but what is also your biggest loss or your biggest missed opportunity that you have identified in this as well? So just trying to understand if you've done that assessment yourself.
Yeah, constantly. I think, again, so if you want to talk about an area of success, I think the framework for success, that our work across divisions to get that done so that we can identify what our goals are and how they align to our strategic plan, and really set up that system of support and ongoing progress monitoring, that's a huge win. The curriculum writing work, another huge win. This is work that continued through the pandemic, virtually. I think it's helped to build the capacity of our teachers, our teacher leaders, our admin, and our Lincoln Center staff. Again, I have to really thank the leadership of Lisa Ambrosio, Amanda Price, Stephanie Jensen, for a lot of that work. That's a big win. What Clarence Berry did this year around researching and bringing a team together to look at varying schedules for our middle schools, establishing those student councils, and an articulation pattern across schools. So not only principals were talking more often, but so are students. I think that's a huge win. Lost opportunity, I think, in truth, I think we had a lot of momentum prior to the pandemic with a lot of these pieces of work, and I think just getting back was really difficult. We had some people leave, we had some people come. I think we've had excellent additions to the teams, but that lost time and lost momentum was really difficult, but we felt that the curriculum writing, if there's one thing that we had to focus on and continue, is the core, and that's everything that we do should be around the curriculum. It's social emotional learning, it's academic learning, and so we're really proud of that. We're really proud of our principals and our teachers for their hard work and their determination, and so yeah, that's where I'm at. That's probably excellent work there.
I appreciate you giving the highlights of your big rocks, right, is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, those are the big rocks, all right. It's good stuff, though.
And can you talk a little bit more as to how your budget is inclusive of social and emotional learning, not just for our students, but also for our staff, right? There is a huge need for that in the entire school district, right? So just want to understand, how does that look in your budget today and your initiative around that?
So one of the things that we had presented on and talked about was mental health kits for our teachers, really. And we were lucky enough to have Jennifer Rice de los Sanchez and Stephanie Jakimzik, who were able to find a grant and in partnership with Roe to really start planning for next year to have these mental health kits. And I'm really proud of that, because I think it's really important that we talk about our students having those services, but we also need to ensure that we are giving that time to our teachers. And actually today we had a conversation about what we can do moving into next year, additional steps, both in the summer and throughout next year, so that we can honor and provide time and space for our teachers to look after their own health and wellness, both mind, body, and spirit. And so those are some of the things that we're working on right now. We don't have a definitive plan for that, because that was just part of the conversation that came out of this planning for what I had just mentioned with the partnership with Roe on the mental health kits. They're not going to be called mental health kits. There's another term, and I can't remember right now, but it was the same idea that we had shared with you, I believe, back in November, shared with the board and the community.
And just to tie in a little bit about this, is this Friday, our students at the high school will be presenting a lot of their problem and solution-based research that they have done within the school districts, right? And I know a lot of those students talked a lot about social and emotional programs for the students and staff. And I know that they have looked at a program called CASEL, C-A-S-E-L.
That's something that Jennifer Rice de los Sanchez and I discussed today, and it's actually part of what we were just talking about for CASEL. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And so the students have also done a cost-benefit analysis as well. So,
that's amazing.
If you're wanting to take a look at their research as well, that is going to be this Friday. All right, I'm excited about that.
and a shout out to the civics teacher and teachers who worked with the students. I believe his name is Sean. I can't remember his last name, but thank you for the invite, and thank you for doing that work, because that encapsulates really experiential learning at its finest, right? It's a real problem. These students worked at researching it. They contacted folks here at Lincoln Center to talk to them and get their opinions and ideas and seek out research. Wonderful, wonderful plan. So again, testament to our teachers and the hard work and their creativity. So thanks for that.
And I hate to, but I really have to bring up this other conversation. And this is a conversation, I think, for our board, right? Because we have talked a lot about restorative practices and student behaviors and disciplinary exclusion disciplinary actions. So I'd like, and I've sent a presentation to the entire board, well, not me personally, but through the administration, and it talks about the conversations that are being had nationwide, state level, and even in our district, that's talking about the school to prison pipeline, our reactionary position when it comes to discipline. And so I know that we have some restorative practices sprinkled throughout our school district, but I'd like for our board to have an initiative and for our superintendent to create an initiative around creating restorative practices throughout our entire school district. And what does that look like? Because right now is the budget time, and I'd like for that to be starting as soon as next year. And that's my proposal as a board member, that I'd like to have some sort of district-wide initiative towards restorative practices and transitioning to that, because we've been kicking this bucket down the road, and our students need the assistance in all of this. And this is a very big, high-level, changing patterns of thoughts and the way that we do things, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to have that conversation with the board now in regards to this budgeting, and have a consensus that if we have the superintendent talking about doing a district-wide restorative practice initiative, what does that look like? And previously, board president had talked about the program where a handheld program, I think is what it was, in the last board meeting, where we would have a partnership with the Waukegan Police Department, that if there was a situation at home, that they would contact us at school and have that that particular indicator that we would handle them with care, handle our students with care. So there's a lot of these initiatives that we're looking at restorative practices, and I really think that we need to start diving and shifting towards that, and I'd really like to start that initiative next year.
Yeah, so as in reference to your handheld, I don't know if you called it a program or something, but that is something that we have had discussion on with a consultant, and we're coming back in May around what that would look like. Just getting timely information from the Waukegan PD, like if there's a shooting in the neighborhood around a school, like, you know, how does that information get transferred to the school district instead of hearing it through word of mouth? I mean, the chief is really good at calling Darrow or LeBaron, but to get actual updates on what is actually transpiring in the community, we're working on a system. So we'll be coming back in May. There's a lot of things that are going to be presented in May.
Yeah, I mean,
just to add to that, because I've been working on that same initiative with the local police departments to communicate better with the district. And not just certain employees in the district, but to figure out a way to notify all of you guys on what's going on, not just in Waukegan, but the surroundings too, because that makes a difference. A lot of times something goes on in another city and it comes here. It's unfortunate because we have to remember Lake County is small, so people and families live in different cities. And so when something happens to my cousin in another city, I'm going to go there. So I've been talking to Chief Zupak, Chief Barbie, and Chief Perez, as well as Heidelberg. So I hope you guys continue with that, trying to share information with each other. That makes the difference.
yeah, I agree with that as well. You know, and as we talk about, you know, restorative practices, I mean, it's even talking about making sure that the practices are not very punitive, right? It's really going down to restoring damages, really root cause of behavior, right? So a lot of that, and that's the initiatives that I'd like to see district-wide, not just at one school, not a sprinkle at another elementary, but, you know, I'd like to see it district-wide.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about the continuity piece. And in second step, which is a SEL curriculum that we have at the elementary, you're going to see that restorative practices are embedded within that SEL curriculum. But I just wanted to make that clear that there are elements of it, and some of the work that we're talking about is scaling up into middle school and to high school.
Right, and then so that would be, how do we fund that, right? And that's the conversation that we're talking about in this piece here, that I'd like to make sure that we're having a line item towards that. And, you know, board members, I don't, you know, if you're feeling otherwise or also with this, I mean, I'd just like to understand, you know, this is where I'd like to kind of push more restorative practices district-wide initiative.
That I would hope that we have. I would hope that we have ESSER money to fund that sort of initiative, Ms. Leguizamo, because that's why one of the reasons why we got the ESSER money. Okay, these exact things. So it should not be that hard for a line item to be put in. Now the other thing, if to do that, all it is we need to have a policy devised where we want continuity with restorative practices throughout the district. Put it in policy.
Right. But, you know, as one board member, I need to make sure that I also have consensus at my board member level. So this is why I'm bringing up this conversation and making sure that, you know, we as board members do have consensus on this topic and want to continue and proceed to having that district-wide initiative. And, you know, we've done a lot of investment in restorative practices. We've sent people off to conferences. People have came back in. We've done a lot of trainers. We've done, you know, there's a lot of stuff we've already invested in this in at least the 3 years that I've been here. And, you know, so there's some good stuff going on. It is definitely the way that I think our school system should go. So that's why I'd like to talk about the consensus here and what that conversation looks like.
and it is directly beneficial to our students. And I am looking more, throughout all of this budget and all of that, I'm seeing systemic things, okay, and I am seeing adult-centered things, okay, in here. I'm looking for more student-centered initiatives. Okay, and that's because that's why we have, and why we were so, we were graced with all of that ESSER money to be for student-centered, okay, and we all know that, of course, the adults have to have a part in that, but we have to get more student-centered, and that's one initiative. And I'm going to continue that to say to Mr. Cesario, the curriculum that you're talking about.
Yes.
I certainly hope that the curriculum is continuous. It's not like one school has one curriculum, one school has another curriculum, one school has another curriculum, because that just keeps helter.
No, ma'am. So we've been giving regular updates on this and the process that we've taken. The initial step, again, this was 4 years ago, was to ensure that the math.
I don't remember things 4 years
Well,
ago.
that's why I'm repeating them right now. So the initial step 4 years ago was to ensure that we had the same math program from K to 5 and then from 6 to 8, and then the same ELA program, English Language Arts program, from K to 5 and from 6 to 8 at all the buildings. And then the other piece that we started working on was developing this curricula, right, that is based on biliteracy, so that there was a foundation of biliteracy, so dual language teachers could use it or monolingual teachers could use it. And so right now, speaking of this continuum, is that it is K to 5. Our next move is in through 6 through 8, and then I will say that under Jennifer Rice de la Sanchez's leadership, the fact that she really did a lot of great work with our course offering guide, which helps to really identify what the expectations are at each course. She revisited it. She worked with teachers and counselors to do this, and this is part of the work that we're doing. And I want to emphasize that something else that I also mentioned in a regular update is that this is a process, that the development of the curriculum is always in motion, that at this point, we're continuing to build, but we've done some great work continuing throughout the pandemic. Again, want to thank the teachers, our principals, and our team members here who have contributed to that, because it's a very large task, and they've done a really great job of doing that.
And this probably is a student achievement comment, but I'm gonna make it now.
Sounds good.
What I have been hearing is that the curriculum is ever changing. The continuity, and you get the staff gets acclimated to one way of doing things as they were instructed, and then all of a sudden, bam, it changes and they gotta get acclimated again. And so I am so hoping that we can stop doing that, and we could just have, if we have one curriculum, let's work with that.
Sure.
Let that work. If it doesn't work, then we change it.
Yeah.
But not in the middle, and then expect our teachers and, more importantly, our students to catch hold of it. And
so I just want to make one point of clarification, is that we've not changed any programs. So the programs that I mentioned before are still the same programs. They're the materials that we're using. But the curriculum is not a program. And that was one of the significant changes, is that we were bringing in additional materials that were making sure that they were culturally relevant, and that we had a plethora of resources and programs that our teachers could pull from. And are there some growing pains? There sure are. But this is something that we've been working through. I know that Board Member Gonzalez and Board Member Riddle visited, I believe you visited Oakdale and spoke with the principal and spoke with the students and saw it being implemented. And the implementation is different at different schools. Just like Ms. Leguizamo brought up the fact that the middle schools are different. No, it's not the problem, Ms. Hannah. What I'm saying is that it's not different. What's being implemented is not different, but the issue is that they're at different levels, and that's okay. And so we're here to guide them and assist them. But the materials, they're all on the same platform. We can walk you through that and show you what our partners' results have placed on our platform that we created. Again, a nice resource that was not in existence before, that this is something that we put on online. Again, I'm very proud of it. Is there work that continues to be done? There is work. But again, as I mentioned before, that this is a process.
So,
Okay, yeah.
sorry,
He's raised his hand for a while.
Yeah.
I know it. Mr.
Oh,
Edwards?
sorry, I didn't see you.
But can we give Mr. Edwards a microphone, though? Yeah, do you mind, Mr. Edwards, if we get you a microphone? Thank you.
No.
Oh, okay. Just to piggyback on what you guys were saying, I'm gonna have to agree with you, Mr. Rosario, that it being different at schools, Ms. Hannah, that's not a bad thing. It's actually unique, and it's a good thing, right? But I wanted to ask, because I heard somebody, I believe it was Ms. Hannah that mentioned it, her and Lucy was talking about it. You guys talk about ESSER funds a lot. I've been kind of like doing some research myself, and so I may be off. I know we got 60 million, give or take, around that. I know some of the money in the ESSER funds is given toward capital improvement, a percentage of that. So when we take that percentage of that and we have the rest of it, how much of that ESSER fund is actually going toward the kids? Before you answer, I don't want you to say to me, or I'm not looking for the answer, oh, well, we got more counselors, or we got more of this. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, most times kids are not going to talk to the counselor. They're really not. They're afraid to, because they don't want to say the wrong thing and they get in trouble, right? So just being honest. So I wanted to know how much is left in the ESSER fund, and what is we using it for exactly?
Sure. I have to get back to you on how much is actually left.
Dr. Cesario, Mrs. Polk is ready to answer that, so let her come on up, please.
Okay. So we'll have. Go ahead.
She's been managing that on a daily.
The guru of finance.
It's intentional. Yes, thank you. It's intentional. When we presented the plan to spend the ESSER money to the Board of Education, you all directed the superintendent, who directed us to spend at least 80% of those funds on learning loss and summer enrichment programs. And that's exactly what we put in the grant. I'm glad I got the opportunity to come up and to speak regarding the ESSER money, because it's something I wanted to clarify. When we're budgeting, our initial plan and budgeting is to identify what the greatest needs are for the district, irrespective of the source of funds that are going to be used to pay for those priorities. So there's only one bucket of money. The superintendent has first line responsibility, as well as the board. And so if we have $350 million combined with grants, categorical aid, state aid, and also with property taxes and other miscellaneous resources, we look at what is allowed based upon the priorities that the superintendent approves, that goes from the schools to us, and then the board approves. And we put those priorities into the right bucket of money. So there's not a bucket of money over here that we're approving for the requests that are being presented today, and then $53 million over here that we hold in abeyance for some other expenses that come up. No, everything that is presented to you tonight that's been vetted through the schools, departments, the divisions, and the superintendent are costs that have been prioritized and have been deemed to be important, and if approved by the Board of Education without question from the community, would utilize the resources or the revenue that is available to the district. I just needed to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pope, for clarifying that, but I don't think my question was answered because we're not still being told how much is in the ESSER fund. And then I hear you say that we are allocating some of the money to some summer initiatives. I need somebody to elaborate that on me because I received an email today that went out to middle school, elementary school and middle school parents, and about summer school, that is saying that we are using some type of data system to pick and choose which kids go to summer school. So my question is this, let me finish. If we have ESSER money that was given for a loss of learning, what better way to use that money to allow whomever kid want to go to summer school, whether they need it or not? Just because the staff may deem or say that they don't need it does not mean that they actually don't. So I say that to say that money, I hear you saying about, it's not in separate and, y'all don't do it like that. When you receive this money and grants and things of that nature, when we're talking about COVID, this is different. This is something that we have never dealt with. So why would we combine that with anybody? Take out what you're going to take for the capital improvement and use the rest for these babies. Our test scores, we know, have declined drastically. So how are we supporting loss of learning with what's left? I don't get it.
The allocations that we get, and I know Mr. Chin can speak to this as well as I can, we are required to spend a certain percentage of those monies on summer school. We're required to do that. We're also required to spend a certain amount on learning loss. And so because, and we strategically do this, because the schools have been given the opportunity to identify what strategies they want to implement to address learning loss within their schools, some of which is tutoring before and after school, and I'll let you speak more in depth to that. We look at our budget team, look at those submissions, and we allocate the monies appropriately within the ESSER money. And we submit that application, Mr. Chen does, submits that application to the State Board of Illinois, and they approve it. And so, yes, the expenses that we are submitting when that application is submitted at the beginning of the year address each of those buckets because we are required to spend a certain amount on summer school initiatives, a certain amount on learning loss.
Can I add a little?
So even with the COVID money, if we're allocating a certain amount for summer school, right? This was money we didn't expect, right? Okay? And so because we didn't expect it, that's even more of a reason to put more into the summer school. After all, this was money we was not expecting, that we didn't know what was coming or we wasn't counting.
Yeah, I believe you're working off the premise that we're not trying to add more money to summer school, and that is not the premise. So Dr. Cesario, can you please explain?
I just want to clarify this.
School will work.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How summer school will work, some of the barriers that we're having.
No problem. So our approach to summer school has been the same, and that is that I'm going to tell you right now that we always work with the finance department, and we try to spend as much as we can to service as many students as possible. The big issue that we're having in the prioritization and why data was used is to, in this instance right now, we don't have the staff. At this point, well, Mr. Edwards, you're asking me to answer a question, and I'm trying to do that right now. We are staffing right now. We are assigning students based on the staff that we currently have, and we are doing the best that we can. So right now we have to prioritize where we're at and what students to place with what staff we have. But we've been very innovative with what we've been able to do and the programming. Last year, partnering with a lot of folks from the community to expand the offerings that we have. But it's not a question of not wanting to service students. It's a question of having the ability to have the supervision and the appropriate people in places to provide those services in a safe manner, right?
And I appreciate you answering that, and I'm glad you did, because I knew the answer of it, and this is it for me, y'all, I promise. You just answered the question, and that's the reason why we can't have as many, because we're short of staff. Let me finish. So, because you just said that, right? I say to you, Superintendent Placencia, and any staff that's in here, when we send out those emails to the community, be honest as to why. Explain to them why this is the reason that it is. And if you do that, it keeps people from me having to come here to ask these questions, because then I get a better understanding. Based off the email that I read, I wouldn't have guessed we not having it because we're short of staff. So I'm just saying, let's be a lot more transparent with the community, because we're not.
Thank you for the comment, and I think us sending out the messaging, saying how we have to prioritize, was an attempt to be as transparent as possible with this. And being explicit, maybe that is a great suggestion. Thank you for the feedback.
But I also think you're working off the premise that kids will be turned away from summer school. And since I've been here, we've never turned kids away. As a matter of fact, we always have more slots for kids to go in. So, so please know that, did last
and we continue to sign kids up throughout
constantly.
The summer. So
also,
some students sign up and they don't come.
Our 9-month employees. So some teachers will choose that they want to work summer school. It's a choice. So that doesn't mean that there's a lack of teachers, but it's a choice. If I want to work summer school and I want to put that time in, I'll apply. I may want to stay home with my children and enjoy my children for the summer. So we work with the amount of staff that we have, and that's the amount of students we take in. But last year, was there, it was a hybrid year, but prior to the pandemic, was there a waiting list?
We continue to add students, and we go off the list that we have.
And
there
how
are students sign up and they don't always attend the whole time, so we're constantly monitoring. The area superintendents meet daily and report on the number of students that are attending so that we can bring more people in.
Right.
It's a priority for us.
It's also the principals are creating, in a sense, their own summer school with the variety of programs that we spoke before, and they are targeting or supporting, I don't want to say targeting, supporting their most at-need students, right? So we know that our second graders are having a really hard time transitioning back from the pandemic. So there's going to be a very intentional focus to increase their seat time over the summer. So when we're looking at data, that's what that means, that we're being very intentional on who we give allocation to those seats to. That doesn't mean that all children will not be considered, but principals are having that autonomy to say, listen, Teresa, summer school could really benefit with you. Work with my parents to ensure that I'm there to extend my instructional time within the school.
And so up to right now, we've hired 183 teachers pre-K to 8 and 85 high school. So we've hired everyone who's applied.
Okay, and I appreciate
No, I just want to give you an update. Yeah.
But even when you subtract that from the number that we lost, that's nothing. And to go back to you, Ms. Teresa Placencia, I appreciate the response, right? You say because, staff are 9-month employees, and I'll say this respectfully to every member on that board. This is the number one reason why we need to show our staff more support We need to look at increasing their pay. We have to give them a reason to want to do this. And right now, they don't have a reason. Do you understand what I'm saying? This 9 months have been tragic for them, rough to say the least. Their hands are tied over there. So I say this to the board, I need you guys to go back tonight and to re-listen to this meeting and go back to a few other meetings of the things that some of us have said to you. It's been said out here to you guys tonight. Think about that, please. It only makes sense. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, and that also, I mean, because, so Superintendent, you had talked about the second grade, right? And we haven't even got on the discussion yet in regards to the reading initiative and what that looks like here in the budgeting piece of this, right? And so we've talked about adding potentially the science of reading, right? Is that I just want making sure I'm getting that right?
Yeah, science of reading, phonics.
So that's one of the things that we talked about. We do have TutorMate in here, right? And we expanded that. So it's a program that scales up. So last year we had kindergarten. Next year we'll have kindergarten, first grade, and then the following year it'll scale up to second grade. And yes, it's a phonemic. It's where students are working with an adult who has been trained in this program, focusing on early literacy, especially phonemic awareness.
Yeah. And if I may
go ahead, Ms.
piggyback
Hannah.
on what you're saying in terms of the phonemic awareness. See,
Yes.
we are forgetting, and we're still missing the mark, if you will, because those students that are, and I'm going to keep hammering at this.
Yes.
Because the students that are in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, they may not have gotten all of those initiatives, right? So we are still pushing students upward, but they're not reading at grade level. And see, I understand starting at pre-K, first, second. Got that. Excellent. By the time they get to third and fourth, they'll be on target. What about those students that has been pushed up that are going into the upper grades, going into the upper grade, elementary, middle, and high school that are not reading on grade level? And I wish you all would please look at that.
We are.
Right.
We are. And you know, the guidance and the feedback from the board does not fall on deaf ears. So everything that we're talking about, again, we're talking about the science of reading. TutorMate was one of the things that we incorporated. Is it the fix for everything? No, it's not. The work that we're doing around curriculum writing, we have a lot in motion here. I said it before, and it's not an excuse, but it's a reality. It's not one thing that's going to fix it. It's going to be a number of things that we need to do to address it, and we're in the midst of that. But thank you for bringing that up again, Ms. Hannah. Again, it has not. No, and you don't have to. I'm glad that you keep bringing it up. That's great that you're advocating. We are too. I just want to emphasize that my team works hard day in and day out, that we have been working on this, and the number of things that we have in place right now were not in existence prior to my administration. So I want to make that clear because I'm very proud of my team and the hard work that they do. Thank you.
And that's great
I
to
could
hear.
just say one thing just to kind of summarize. I think what I've heard from the community and from the board is that we need to be very precise in clarifying to the community so we don't cause any people to be upset about.
Yes, thank you for the
summer school,
feedback,
instance.
and yes, indeed.
That we are indeed explaining to them, how important it is for our second and third graders to read. That's why we're concentrating on that. We
Most
need to give the
definitely.
rationale behind some of these letters that go out, so that we let them know that every student, as the superintendent has said, will be able to go to summer school. But right now, we're prioritizing because of the number of teachers that have signed up.
We're still hiring.
Yes, and we're still hiring. Yeah, just so that that sort of
Sure.
message gets to the
Yes,
community.
most
so we
definitely.
Don't get them upset and think that, some students are going to be excluded.
That wasn't the intent, but thank
Okay.
you for the feedback.
Great.
I also want the board to know that principals will also be sending their own messaging home, right? We were just letting the district know what summer school would look like, what is
Right.
the intent, right?
Right.
As you know, if you listen through the whole presentation, I believe it answers a lot of questions.
Right.
Then just, that's why the link is in the letter.
Right. The other thing I just wanted to make a comment about, Ms. Leguizamo, or Ms. Gonzalez,
Leguizamo.
mentioned, and Ms. Hannah too, about our concern that we've been hearing from the community about restorative justice and SEL and the teachers going through difficulties. I wonder if, in one of these budget meetings, we could pull out some information to show where monies are going to directly address these problems that the community's concerned about, so that we see millions of dollars going in certain areas, but we don't understand the big picture. And we want to understand that these areas are getting addressed as well,
Sure. And as I mentioned before, that second step is a SEL curriculum where restorative practice is embedded within that. And then I also mentioned the grant opportunity and the partnership with Roe. And Superintendent Placencia mentioned Castle. That's going to address middle school, right? And then we also have to address the high school piece.
Yep.
And so we can share and it will be shared with you, the MTSS budget, where a lot of that is couched right there.
But I'm thinking maybe that it could
You want us to be explicit in sharing this with
explicit
you.
somewhere
Sure.
in the budget process to show us in a simple form, keeping it simple, that so the community and myself can understand it, that this is what is the needs that we've been hearing.
That's a reasonable request. Yeah, we can highlight that for you and
Highlight that,
and have Mr. Kimzik share that with you in a brief slide
Yeah.
to highlight where it is in her budget. And what you're going to find is that there are elements of this across
Yes.
all of the departments within ASAP. So teaching and learning, DL,
Yes.
EL, equity. You're going to see that outreach. You're going to see that these are woven throughout.
Yes.
So we can pull them out and create a nice one slide to share that with you.
And what you must not forget, Mr. Cesario, that you all want the Board of Education to expend funds for what you want to do. I'm old school. Show me.
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
what
not a problem.
I want to know.
Sure.
I don't want highlights. I don't want summaries. I want explicit, specific. That's the way I have always operated. Okay, and so when we're being asked to expend all these money, approve all this money, then don't come and tell us half a story. And I'm just using that as an example.
Thank you, because I'm not telling half a story. I was presenting.
I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Just take and give us the information so that the Board of Education is the last stop for the money.
Agreed.
Right, and you want the money. We want our kids to read. We want our kids to do math,
As do we. Yes.
science, technology, all of that stuff. Okay, and so just give it to us.
Sure. If you want it the way Mr. Riddle had described, we can provide it to you that way, because again, it's across. They're all in the budgets.
Yes.
So we've submitted all these budgets. So it is transparent. You're provided with that. Again, this is a high-level overview, but I can pull them together. That's what I was saying, from each of the departments, put them on one page so it's explicit like you're asking. If there's additional narrative that you want with that, what I'll do is I'll have Mr. Kimzik come up and kind of give a brief narrative explaining where this is and within what budget and why. And it probably have a couple other folks in there to to explain, because again, it's in teaching and learning, it's in diverse learners, it's in multicultural and bilingual education, it's in the equity, it's in outreach, it's across. The big one, though, I will say, just to reiterate this point, is it's embedded within the second step program, that the restorative piece is. And I think what I've heard tonight is that the board, or I believe, would like a kind of an initiative, a district-wide initiative, to make it more explicit around restorative practices and to highlight that and to show that. So that's something that we can take back and discuss.
And we also must have, and I spoke about this before at the last meeting, I think, regarding our group of students that are at the lowest academic efforts or whatever. And I mean, I was looking at scores at the report card, and it is just it's dismal, and there needs to be an extra effort, if you will, okay, with that
Agreed.
group, that subgroup of students. And that's what I'm going to be looking for in this coming year.
It's the disproportionality.
Well, the disproportionality, and not so much that, just the fact that they're so the group is such a small number of students, and it doesn't make sense that they are still at the lowest academic
To have the highest
achievement.
percentage, yep.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a brief comment, kind of going back to what was spoken about earlier, because I think that, obviously we all, as administrators, as board members, we have the same goal of making sure that our students are grade level ready and that they graduate. That's our goal. We want them to get there. That's actually one of the reasons I actually appreciate all the efforts behind summer school, because thinking about those students, Ms. Hannah, you need to know who they are. And I think that's some of the data that you guys go behind and saying, hey, if you're already excelling and you want to keep going through your courses, you're more than welcome to come to summer school. But if you need your credits, you need to be first in line, because we don't want you to fall further behind. And so I think, for me, what I take away from this discussion and where, talking about where the money is going, I think those initiatives are starting, and they are more successful, because last year when I went to some of the schools and learned about summer school, like, the kids had a blast. Like, they had the most fun I've ever seen. And usually, like, we would talk about summer school and they wouldn't traditionally like going to it. It was something that no one wanted to do. But they had so much fun, and I think that they made some academic gains in that summer. And so I think that targeting really is it kind of goes hand in hand with this initiative for summer school.
And we saw those gains, Ms. Gonzalez. We saw those gains in our first cycle of the EA testing. We saw that coming back into the school. Okay. However, that second cycle of testing, it went down, and that is what bothers me. Why did they did good coming in? Okay, they had that support at summer. Came in, did good, got into school, and then it went down in the second cycle. And so that's what I think we need to figure out. Why did that happen?
Right.
I'd also tell you to look at how many students were tested during the hybrid model versus when we asked all students to come back in the fall.
Okay, I understand those. I
That's a data
understand the different variables, but it still does not matter. The numbers still went down.
It does matter because it's a data point. It does matter.
Sure it does.
And
It's a variable. It definitely matters when you look statistically at why the number during the hybrid
Okay,
model
why
would be
did it
one
go
way.
down then?
Versus, I'm not going to do a hypothetical off the data not being in front of me. I'd like to see how many students were tested under the hybrid model, how many students actually came in because we gave the option for students to come in to test, right? So what students were those tested? And so which grade group or what percentage or percentile are you talking decreased?
Well, I'm talking about the presentation that we all received. Right
But you're doing a comparison to the spring cycle.
The
So
spring cycle, the winter, and the spring.
right, and so it seems that you're very familiar. So what data point, what percentage are you seeing? Was it in second grade? Was it in fourth grade? Was it the high school?
It was all of them. It was all the numbers.
In math or
according
in
to
English,
what?
ELA?
Yeah, ELA and math.
And so
Everything went down, Superintendent.
So I will tell you, we anticipated things would go down because kids had not been in contact in physical school. So we knew that. So during the hybrid model, how many kids got tested? I would say that, I don't want to say it's minimal, but I definitely say that that's a data point versus they're all coming in. And when we tested when they all came in, it was to assess where they were and the
Right.
instructional loss that they've had.
Absolutely. And they
Right?
did wonderful. Those numbers were better coming back in. When they came back in, the numbers, and you don't have to look as Jonathan, Dr. Brown, ask him. He was the one that presented
So I
the
think
numbers.
what we can do is we'll look at those data numbers again because there's a lot of data points flying around that we'll look at those numbers again. And we're definitely going to look at them again because we're going to be looking at end of year data.
Right.
And so we'll
and
see
it's
that
1, 2,
comparison.
3
Right.
cycles.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Right,
There's a
and-
beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year.
Right. And they were.
And
Go ahead.
if I recall, Ms. Han, I think Mr. Brown explained that the reason they may have gone down is because the testing, that the children weren't tested again, that at the same level, they were tested at a higher level on the second test.
Yeah.
So the second test required more learning. So.
Well, they were in school.
Yes,
to
they
get
were.
That,
Yes,
that
of
more
course.
learned.
Of course. But anyway,
we
that's
need to
another
go on.
issue.
Yeah.
I think what we're.
Teaching, student
Again,
achievement.
I need to ask, do we want to keep our discussions like this tonight and be here till 10 o'clock, or do we want to let our presenter
I'm finished.
present,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
and ask our
I've been
questions
finished for a while.
So,
You're finished. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I guess from what we're hearing from the board and from the audience, I still think, and I'm a person that likes to see, I hear the concerns in the community. We've got security concerns that have been expressed. We've got counseling and restorative justice for our children with SEL. We've got our teachers who are stressed out. We've got the tutoring, the extra, learning loss. If we could pull some of those figures together, even if you just did it for me, but I think it might help myself and some of the community members, just to show our community that we are spending money to address these issues that they are concerned about. And if we could just put it together, I know it's mixed in on these higher level budget, it's all over the place.
Sure.
But just so that, I know that's a lot of work on your part, but at some point in our budget presentation, maybe the next one, we could see where that money is that's
Sounds
addressing
good.
things like security and,
Yep.
as I said, SEL and
Might be able to
restorative
pie it
justice
out.
and tutoring.
Say again?
Mrs. Polk, can you please
Might be
make
able
that
to pie
happen?
that out.
Mrs. Polk is who puts this
Yeah.
presentation together.
Summer school.
So
yeah.
if you can highlight some of those big bucket, we can work with like the social, emotional, et cetera.
Even include-
Extended learning time, right? Safety and security, if we can put those buckets in our next budget meeting, and then we can come back to the board and show them that.
Good.
yeah, and I just want to highlight, because I know Ms. Wozniak had mentioned it here, just really quick, she had mentioned about sometimes that summer school is viewed as punitive. And I really like us to get away from that idea, right? That's been a long time in our community, and I think last year's summer school was such a great summer school that it was amazing.
Yeah.
That it really, it shouldn't be that way. It should be really enrichment, no matter where they are in the data point. So, Ms. Wozniak, I know you wanted to say something, so if you want to add to that.
Go ahead and say it.
I think we are doing a great job with our summer school. We did not have a very robust summer school before the superintendent came back here.
No,
Because you don't know the history.
Well,
Don't say that.
that is my understanding, that there was not a robust summer school
We had
program,
summer
and we have
bridges
advanced
forever.
it. And I think we're doing a great job at getting the word out
Well, thank you.
to get the kids in.
We start planning at the beginning of the year. We start planning in September for the following year. So this is an ongoing piece where we're planning, and it's a combination of SEL. It's giving principal autonomy, and it's also making sure that we're bringing in other resources. But it's got to be a balance between really enrichment and an opportunity for students to learn and grow.
Are we going to have
It
it
has
at
to be
all?
fun.
Are we going to have it at all the schools?
We're not having it in every school. So part of the process is identifying schools that have capital projects, and then those schools are off the board. And like what was brought up here, like if there's an issue where we can't have staffing at one building, well, then we offer to another building. So we try to offer as many buildings as possible. Last year, we tried to have it in every building because we wanted to get kids back in. We tried to, but there were some capital improvement issues.
So the answer is, if they're not having major renovations, yes.
Yes, that's the answer. Thank you, Superintendent. I think she wants me to sit down now. So, but I have to answer the questions of the board.
Thank
So,
you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
didn't finish the
Cesario.
whole
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
presentation.
Yeah.
Page 43 talks about retention incentive program. What is that?
oh, that's
Mrs. Polk will come
that's
to
not my.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I was finished with my portion of the presentation.
I get it.
Yes, sorry about that.
Handing the baton.
Yes.
We're done. Okay.
All right.
I got
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I'm going to dispel some of these myths that you all have about our district historically. I'm going to gather all the people that worked and always worked hard on summer school and many of the things that were done in our district, and I'm going to have them come in this boardroom, and they will tell you all, okay? Because that's not a factual statement that you made.
But to add to the piece where I know that my community has been saying that, summer school has been deemed as punitive, that's the way I looked at it when I went to the school district. My kids looked at it when they were going to the school district, and that's a definite thing on how people feel about that. But the way that it was set up last year, I really liked watching it. I like watching the enrichment piece of it, the growth in it, and so I'd really like for us to stay and move away from it having that perception of being punitive action, and it needs to be more enriching. So
We had enrichment.
I went to summer schools here, and I can give you a few of my stories. Those are my actual experiences. Everybody has different experiences, but it's out there, right? I'm not saying that some people didn't have great experiences, but I'm gonna say that there were people out there that did not have good experiences.
Thank you, Mrs. Leguizamo. It certainly was. I think all of us agree. Last year, it was a lot of fun, as the
It was a
superintendent
good
said.
summer school.
And it was great, yeah.
Absolutely,
Last
it
year,
was
it was
great.
wonderful, wonderful. So we're going to recreate it this year. It's going to be even more fun. And it's going to be a great learning opportunity for our kids, too. Okay, Mr. Loza, if you want to...
All right, the next 4 slides are departments that don't really report to academic supports and programs or to the operations department. The first slide would be legal services. They've got projected costs excluding existing positions of $243,863. Included in that are settlements that are done throughout the year and farming out some legal services, such as property tax appeals. The next slide would be projected expenses for the superintendent's office, $539,947. And then the next slide would be the chief of staff, Mr. Alajakis, His budget is $30,500. And last but not least, Board of Education, budget of $147,000. So having said that, we're going to go on to strategic budget requests, and I will bring up Ms. Edwards to discuss those slides.
Thank you. Good evening, Board of Education, Superintendent, community members, and colleagues. I will briefly talk about the next few slides. If we can go back one. Okay. This slide is just showing you, we get many budget requests within the business and financial office. So this is the link of all the requests that we have from different operation divisions. So we have operations, we have ASAP, we have schooling, and other divisions that make up in this link. So you can go to the next slide, please. All right, this slide is basically stating those summaries of budget requests. And I want to say that there are summaries because the schools and different entities will put in a budget request, and we, in the finance department, we go back and look at grants and stuff to help fund these various requests. So this is not like the final number per se, they will be adding to it. So don't be alarmed of negative numbers, because we look back at different grants to see how we can fund these requests. Next slide, please. And this is the same thing as the previous slide. Another request that came in, and we would go in and we would look at different grants and things like that and see how we can fund it. This is on? Okay. And the next slide. Again, we're looking at the same thing, just another request that came in. And we're looking at services, the budget amount that's requested, and the amount that's there. And then, like I said, don't be alarmed with the negative numbers. They could be over or under. But we look at different grants and various grants to see how we can fund this request as well on these sheets.
Dreambox Learning is zero budgeted?
Because it's a one-time, no? With no amount?
Yeah.
The 200,000?
Because it's a one-time amount, yes.
What this is we got additional requests in. Okay. And so these are adjustments that we'll have to make to the basic information that we presented. We did not revise the original presentation, but we wanted to show you that we've gotten additional requests in.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. All right, so this slide here, we're just denoting that the food service contract, Fund 10, is going to increase. So we put that amount in, it'll increase by $138,780.69. And then the Chief of Staff, Public Affairs Office will increase by $9,000 and an inadvertent emission on that one.
Wait, what does that mean?
We missed it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It was a little accident, so I will turn it over to Ms. Polk.
Kudos to the teachers, and kudos to the Board of Education who made this recommendation in the superintendent hearing what the Board of Education said, as well as what the community has said. And the recommendation is going to be presented to the Board of Education relative to a retention incentive, not a bonus, but a retention incentive. This is something that is allowable from ESSER. We contacted the state, Mr. Chin and I contacted the State Board of Education, and this is an allowable expense for retention of school-based personnel. This recommendation is going to be based upon school-based, let me say that loud, school-based personnel, teachers, principals, assistant principals, paraprofessionals, and the like, safety, who are part of that, yes, school-based personnel. It is a recommendation at present, subject to change, $1,000 for those who work the longest, 261 days, the entire, and prorated based upon other days that individuals are working.
The longest that this year?
This year, yes.
they've been in the district 10 years.
No, this year, 261 days, calendar days. Yeah.
Sorry, Ms. Polk, not to cut you off, but I appreciate that because I salute our veteran staff members and our teachers. But sometimes, you know, your veteran status doesn't equate to how much you've learned or how much you've worked throughout the pandemic or throughout this past year. And I think it's overdue, but I appreciate that we're talking about this now and including it in the budget because when we have community members ask when, it's like when we talk about the budget. And it's not that we didn't want to do it right away. It's like there's a process by which we needed to allot for these kinds of things to happen. And obviously you are like the #1 person to make it happen. So thank you for you and your team for.
Well, I really can't take any credit at all for this. I think it's the Board of Education and the Superintendent's initiative, and our office simply calculated it for them.
So you said $1,000?
$1,000.
So a para would get $1,000 and a teacher would.
Depending on the work calendar, it's going to be prorated, but everyone would get $1,000 as the base. And then it comes up to like $3.83 a day. We multiply times the number of days that they work.
Okay.
Yes.
So the paras who are paid a lot less are still getting the same kind of bonus?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no variance. We also put in the proposal that those individuals who work less than 6 months would be ineligible for this incentive because they came on the latter part or they didn't work the entire time. So this is a retention incentive, right? And then we also said that long-term subs would be eligible. Day-to-day subs would not be eligible because they could work sporadically. They could work 2-3 days, you know.
But we need to make sure that, and I certainly hope because we have, I just remember the one gentleman that came and they
long-term sub.
He's been in the district for 15, 16 years, but they still have him classified as a day-to-day sub. You understand what I'm saying? And so if what you said is going to stand, then he's not going to be able to get the incentive. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not fair.
Why wouldn't he be able to get it, Miss Hannah?
Huh?
Why wouldn't he be able to get it?
Because she just said that day-to-day subs.
So if he's been here 18 years,
But
subbing,
they have him classified, I guess.
he wouldn't be eligible for the bonus?
As it's currently written, he would not be, but again, this is the draft proposal, is subject to change based on discussions, and that would be something we would have to look to see what the attendance is for each of them to determine whether they've had consistent employment.
He's been working as a
Yeah.
long-term.
But we would have to look in the system to verify that.
I would advise us, let's not get into one-offs because
Yeah.
we're still baking this out, and you're going to always have to draw a line.
Yeah.
And we just have to know that.
Right.
And so this is going to cover all of our union employees, all of our long-term subs, et cetera. I also want you to get into the piece, though. If you have only been with us 3 months, that $1,000 does not look the same versus you've been here all year long, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
there'll be different variables on, you know, a person who's been here all year long versus someone who just joined the organization.
Yes.
That's right.
So there will be lines drawn, because if not, this is just an open door, and
That's
there has to be clear cut. Some people will fall in the parameters, most people will fall in the parameters, 1 or 2 may be one outliers. But once you breach that, then you have to do all.
Is it going to be paid in increments, or is it going to be paid $1,000 bonus?
Specifics haven't been discussed, but in the proposal, it says that we intend to pay it out by June 30th.
Okay, can I ask a question?
I didn't get into the estimated
Is
cost.
there anything about the person having to stay for next year to get this?
Because
That is not
Calling it a
in
retention.
the current proposal,
Okay.
not in the current one.
It is It is something that we were discussing, but we'll be coming back to the board with more on that.
So before you get it all worked out, we'll get a chance to review
Yes.
it before we
Yes,
vote
this
on it,
is a
right?
proposal.
Yes, yes.
So paras have a 6-7 hour day? So it's based on the day, not the
Day,
hours worked.
not the hours worked.
So if they've been there that whole day and their day is only 5 hours,
They still get the day.
paid the $1,000. But they have to understand that the $1,000, then they get the FICA and all that stuff taken out.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
because that's gonna
Good
be-
question. I didn't point that out. It's not going to be marked up. The current proposal states that it's not going to be marked up for deductions.
No, it will be $1,000 and whatever taxes or whatever bracket where you're at, you would have to pay your taxes off that.
You would have to pay your taxes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And
We're
are we
not
think-
paying the taxes.
No.
Correct.
They're paying the taxes.
Are we thinking of this only for our own employees or somebody that's contracted as well?
No, only our own
Own
employees.
employees,
So it wouldn't
yeah.
be bus drivers and things like that?
No.
Because
Unless they're
the
district
contracts, the extra increases in the contracts, we are helping with that. But the company pays that for their employees, not us.
And,
Sorry, go ahead.
and I appreciate this, appreciate the work that's going into it. But I'm still looking toward the future to hold on to the staff that we have, particularly, our support staff, our paras, and those people that are on hourly wages, okay? Are we trying to see anything in terms of, like, maybe adding a little bit to their hourly pay?
I would say not at this time. We will go to negotiations when we're up for review contractually.
Right, but the Board of Education can say, we want our paras.
The Board of Education has not said that as of yet, and
I
so unless we
understand.
have consensus from the board, but our attorney's not here, so I would say that we table this until our attorney's here, but we do have a contract with different bargaining units.
I know, yeah, I'm aware of that, but I also know that the Board of Education can say, we want our staff to get X,
I'd
Y,
also
and Z.
caution the board, because the money that we have this year, and Mrs. Polk is standing at the podium, may not be the money that you have 2, 3, 4, and 5 years from now. And so until there's an analysis done along with legal on what those contractual reviews and guidelines and bindings are, my advice would be to table that conversation till that research is done.
Well,
And
aren't we
just-
currently moving toward raising their pay so that we hit the $15 per hour for the lower paid people by
Yes, we are-
2025?
Yes, we are currently in negotiations, and the board is updated on how negotiations are going. And so that is one of the areas that we are working towards.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, just because this is the temporary solution doesn't mean that down the line we haven't, in bargaining conversations talked about what it'll look like later. So just for the community to know that it's, I wish it wasn't incremental, but we luckily haven't raised taxes, and that's a really huge part of all of this as well.
In 3 years.
And yeah.
Yes. The approximate price tag on this, I have to say that, is about $1.4 million, just so you know.
We got, that's a small amount of money, considering the ESSER money that we did get, and we've got to spend all that money within the next couple of years, right?
That's correct.
And right, and we're penny pinching here and penny pinching there. If we don't spend the money, what happens to it, Ms. Polk?
Well, I don't think like that, because
Well, no, I
we're
know
going to
you
spend
don't
it.
think like
Yes.
that. I'm not thinking like that
Yeah.
either. But I am realistic.
Yeah.
If we don't spend the money, by 2024, what happens to the
It
money?
goes back to the state.
It goes
Well, we never get it because it's reimbursable.
That's
But
right.
we're very strategic in placing requests and allowable costs into the grant so that we can maximize it. It's a good question, Ms. Hannah, and the reason why I said I don't want to think like that, because I am very, very hopeful that we don't send any money or leave it on the table.
We need to spend some more money on the children. Spend more money on the children. Kid?
I must say, I must compliment you that this $1,000 for everybody is great because the underpaid paras or lower paid paras and teachers are getting the same as the higher paid. And it's equitable.
Yeah. Again, I can't take credit for it. It's the Board of Education and the superintendent, but it's really a good idea. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I know we've been pushing, and so appreciate the creativity around this as well. So thank you for presenting this as a proposal. Really excited to see what this will look like for board approval in its final stage.
Mrs. Logozama, I have to state this. I do want to state that our board president has really, and with the number of board members, have really pushed this. There was some talk about a promise that he made for 4 days. I believe the conversation was more around we would look into some type of incentive or appreciation for our staff. But however, all of our board meetings are taped and they're online, so you could go back exactly to see his exact words at that time. But it was more around an incentive and an appreciation for our staff. And I know he's not here, so I do want to call that out in his absence, along with all the other board members who have championed this.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate, like I said, the creativity around this.
Didn't the governor say something about giving days to our teachers?
Not teachers. There's 5 days mental health days for students. And he's thinking about making it for teachers, but...
Well, I could have sworn that, well, it's in legislation.
It's in the
I
works,
know
yes,
that.
absolutely, Ms.
It's
Hannah.
in legislation. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The ISB funding coding error. I was elated when the superintendent came down to my office with the memo. ISB inadvertently made an $87 million error where monies went to Chicago Public Schools. And so as a result, from 2018, some school districts did not receive their adequate allotment of evidence-based funding. And so our district did not receive the $2.1 million. They're proposing that we're supposed to get this money before the end of this fiscal year.
Oh, wow.
We're hopeful that we're going to get it. But when we're doing budget projections, we take a very conservative approach in doing that. And so we're not including this money until we actually get it in hand, because 87 million is quite a large amount of money for them to disperse in one fiscal year. So, but we're happy about it. And so that's probably a good thing for us. Not probably, it is a good thing for us.
Yeah. I was gonna mention, and once we have it, because I think like you misspoke. Once we have it, if we could get an update on it, and if we're still in budget conversations at that time, if there's board concurrence, I'd like that to pay for the incentives and to use the full amount if it's not going to anything else that we absolutely need.
So, Mrs. Gonzalez, can we table that because we are going to hold and explain why we could not do more, or what the rationale for Mrs. Polk.
Okay.
So we're just giving you a high overview, but there's way more in depth here that we'll talk through.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Polk, I guess when I listen to you say that's a large amount of money, and when I look at society, and I watch the government, when they decide they want to send money somewhere, they can send it and they can come up with it and keep sending it. So, you know, I'm not going to point out what I'm trying to say, but if you watch current events and news and whatnot, that's not a lot of money. I mean, right now, you know, we're helping Ukraine out, and I don't know if you pay attention to the money that we're sending for artillery, and you know, so I'm just saying it's not a large amount of money. I guess sometime when I look at government, I be trying to figure out where their morals and values really are at the people that's sitting at the seat. So I just thought I'd just say that, you know. Thank you.
That's fair. For us, I've said this multiple times when we're presenting the budget, that we have to look at our cash level, and we also have to look at our budget levels. And during the budget process, we can only overspend the current year projection of revenue by a certain amount, or the state is going to force us to do a deficit reduction plan, because they're not only looking at the current year, they're looking at 2-3 years down the line. And so that's why you might say, okay, you have $86 million in the bank as a projected ending fund balance, and you're projecting to get so many millions in. Why is it that we can't spend all of this money? Well, the state is trying to ensure that you're not overspending in a current year, so that the following year, most of it, right, happens again and is compounded, because about 80% of your expenditures is for human capital. Right. So if that goes up, you're going to end up go negative, 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 and then they're going to force you, right? So that's why we're very, very cautious when we're looking at these numbers, to ensure that we don't have to do a deficit reduction plan, and that our ending fund balance will leave the district fiscally solvent. And not only the current year, but in following years, succeeding years.
And one more question and I'm done. And that's why I'm looking proactively, right? Mm-hmm. When we get done with all of this ESSER money, mm-hmm. we have to go back to our regular budget. Mm-hmm. And that's how come when, respectfully, okay, I disagree with you saying that we put it all in one pot. Mm-hmm. Because as long as it's all in one pot, okay, people think it's it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, to put, here's my ESSER money over here, but here's my real money over here. Mm-hmm. And we need to work with our real money, mm-hmm. and use our ESSER money as whatever our initiatives and everything over here, mm-hmm. okay? But we keep our real money, keep that separate. Mm-hmm. You understand? Mm-hmm. So that we know what we have there come 2024 when we don't have that money mm-hmm. anymore. You know what mm-hmm. I'm saying?
Yes, well said. Okay. That's what we do in essence.
Okay.
We do exactly that.
Right.
And that's where all of the initiatives that's happening right now, that's submitted to us, that's one time, right? Mm-hmm. We put it in the ESSER. Mm-hmm. And then we try our best to preserve the local, because we have more flexibility with that, as well as we have more time, right?
Right.
So going through this process, that's why we talk about what the priorities are first, irrespective of the source of funds. And then because what is so important about this whole process, and I get excited about it, right? My team will tell you that, is that the money doesn't drive the plan drives the money. We put the money on the plan. So because of that, we talk about the priorities, talk about what you all want to do, and then we say, okay, what grant can fund it, what local can fund it, and then that's how we do it. And then leave ourselves solvent. So you said it, Ms. Hannah. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we do.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Any other questions about
I'm
that?
holding mine for the end. I know you still have
We
one
at
more.
the end.
I know you have
We're
one
almost
more,
there.
right?
We're almost there. We're getting there.
Yeah, because actually this slide is just what we said about remaining solvent and also addressing the priorities within the district. So we're done.
Yep, all right.
All right.
I do have some questions.
Good job.
And, so I'm gonna stick with some easy ones really quick, right? So can you really quick, hopefully just describe which link in the slides takes us to the full-time, the FTEs, approvals and denials, so that we have that clear? I know there's a lot of people on the board and in the community that would like to see that.
Okay, yes. Ms. Edwards pointed out that slide. What number was that?
That was 38.
It had the men working.
There it goes, that one there.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
That slide takes you to everything. It has the action steps and goals for operations, for ASAP, for positions are embedded in there. It has the school improvement plans, all of it. Every single thing that was requested is there, and it has its own tab.
Perfect.
We just summarized it in the slides, but you have all the details.
Perfect for that, thank you. And if you can please remind the board and the community here in regards to the update on the tax relief grant. Do you have any information or dates that you can probably share in regards to that?
Unfortunately, we did not get it.
Oh, hot dang.
Unfortunate,
What number
because
did you
the
make?
reason why we didn't get it is because we don't have a high tax rate. The Board of Education has agreed over the last 3 years to keep our taxes level. So it's in essence saying that among all of those that we're competing with, we're not taxing enough. So kudos to the board, kudos to the superintendent, the community, and everybody for not taxing a lot, but then we don't get the tax relief.
All right, well, thank you for that, and I
Thank you.
believe that you may have a different proposal. I know last year we decided to leave $1 million in lieu of the tax relief for the community. So I know that was proposed last year. I'm looking to see what your office is proposing for the next budget on what that looks like. So that'll probably be in the next workshop.
We did it again. What we presented
Oops,
to
we
the...
did it again.
We did it again. What the board proposed to us when we went through the levy process, we did it for the extension. Just what we presented is exactly what we did. We kept it level.
Perfect, perfect, thank you for that. And the last question that I have, and this is more of an outlook, I don't know if you've done this yet, right? In our last conference that we had with our regional office, they talked about they're starting to see trends in the market that's similar to the 2008 recession. And what that is looking like is the local tax dollars is transitioning from corporate to residential. And so I'm wondering to see, have you taken a look at what that looks like in our district? And are we trending in a similar fashion, or are we staying stagnant? So just trying to understand what our market looks like in regards to local dollars.
Yeah.
If you can just, I don't know if you've already done that assessment, you could talk about that now, or you can bring it up in the next budget meeting.
Yeah, matter of fact, Mr. Luosa almost had me fall down on the floor.
Oh, right.
With CPPRT. And so I have staff looking at that right now. Traditionally, we get about $7 million in CPPRT, corporate property taxes. But in the bank, I'll let you say it, Mr. Luosa. What do we have in the bank?
We have $15 million that we've received this year for CPPRT money.
That's wonderful.
Wow, that is wonderful.
My eyebrows
That
are going
is-
up.
You know,
Right,
the city of Waukegan has been doing
Well,
some great work.
Well, I don't know
Or
about
I'm not
that,
sure
but,
what's going on here, so.
So
okay.
I've asked
All right,
Ms. Williams, she has it in her hand, to call the Treasury office
Right.
to find out if it's an error, because it seems like it's a duplicate.
It's too good to be true, right?
Yeah, we've never had that in my 14 years of being here. Have you? I've never seen that before, so.
Good to question.
Well, if
So-
it's written, it needs to be there.
So.
We don't want to spend it and have to pay it back.
Yeah,
is
let's
tough.
not do that either.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and that's just really making sure that we're also staying fiscally responsible for our residential tax property players as well, right? Not to say anything about our corporate, but a lot of times that's where our local money is supposed to try to come from.
Yes.
So I appreciate that outlook and that look already, that you guys are already doing that. So those were all of my questions, Vice President
All right,
Riddle.
anybody else? You okay?
Motion to
Dr. Polk,
adjourn.
We'd like to thank you and your team for an excellent presentation tonight. Thank you, everybody. All in favor? I guess we don't need a motion, do we, to adjourn?
Yes.
We do, okay, all in favor of adjourning?
Oh, and
Yeah.
second.
Oh, yeah, motion.
Okay, everyone?
Motion and second.
Yeah,
Can we have a second?
motion.
All right,
I motion.
Second, okay, motion by Ms. Hannah, second by Ms. Callahan Wozniak. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned.